But yeah, we'll do a little bit of Syria. We'll do a little bit of Syria watch. Obviously, the rebel groups that uh, are anti-Assad, so they're the good guys unconditionally. Those rebel groups are, I mean, they fucking bouldered into Aleppo and took it pretty quickly. As a matter of fact, like a lot faster than anybody could have thought it would have happened. And it's really interesting. Felix had a funny take on it. We'll get started on that. We'll get started on that. He said NATO is awesome. Turkey has essentially run an H-1B visa program for prospective ISIS and HTS members for over a decade, and the only thing they've actually gotten in trouble for during that time was buying S-400s. Yeah, it's true. NATO is so sick. NATO is like, oh, dude, are you bombing Kurdish villages into fucking oblivion? Did you just cut off water? Did you cut off water access to like 1 million Kurds? That's fine. I don't care. Okay? That's okay. It's all good, baby. You do your thing. You know, you got security concerns. That's fine. You got security concerns. What are you going to do? You want these fucking Kurds to have water? Get the fuck out of here. Okay? Oh, did you train? People on Twitter are saying the rebels are ISIS. They are. Some of them are. Okay? The Syrian situation is like obviously a little bit more complex than, something like Israel Palestine, where the morality is very clear. At least, maybe the ways in which there is a just and legitimate solution might be complex, but like the morality of the situation is clear. Whereas like in Syria, every side is bad. I mean, the one side that you can say is good is the Kurdish militias, but then even then they've also kind of done some fucked up things as well at a certain point. So everybody's done some shit, but like the least bad part definitely would be the Kurdish the Kurdish militia forces, which is interesting because they are also backed by the CIA and they've gotten training by the CIA. But for the most part, those guys have been the anti-ISIS forces, right? So they are the anti-ISIS forces, and they were very successful in fighting against ISIS. And they've done a really good job doing that. But the issue here is Turkey is also, by way of NATO, the State Department's operatives here. And Turkey is literally fucking priming, funding, facilitating, arming, training the most militant Islamists in the fucking region. And they have successfully overtaken Aleppo at this point. And it's a very weird set of circumstances because you have the Assad government, okay, done a lot of fucked up shit, okay? Very legitimate reasons as to why people would, try to have a Arab Spring style democratic revolutionary resistance against the Assad regime. But then, of course, as is the case with many of the valid anger and resentment movements that spurn out organically, it's very quickly captured and overtaken by a lot of people who are personally invested in regime change for different reasons. So it's really interesting because on the one hand, you have the Assad government, okay? Not good guys. They're not, okay? It's like, I would say, very similar to Saddam. They're Ba'athist. They're not fundamentalist at all. Just make no mistake. There are differences here. They're still ruthless. They're still brutal. They're still cruel, but they're not like the Fundies. And then on the other side, you have these like Sunni Fundi groups, okay? The Salafist groups, this Al-Qaeda, former ISIS, former Al-Qaeda, they're always cross-pollinating a little bit. And Turkey's backing those guys. Turkey's giving them weapons. Also on the other side, though, Turkey's doing this at the behest of the United States of America. Turkey's a NATO ally. They get to do that. But on the other side, Turkey's literally cooking the other State Department initiative, which is the YPJ and the Syrian Defense Forces that are like the Kurdish militia movements that have existed and gotten funding and training from the American State Department. So you literally have America's own assets fighting against America's other assets in the region because they're fighting against one another. And it's a really fucked up situation. And then you have Hezbollah, which has offended the Assad regime and engaged with some of the Sunni militias some of which are, the ISIS and al-Nusra, like ISIS Salafist militias. You have the Russian government that is also backing the Assad regime as well. So overall, it's like every regional actor is they're just trying to take a fucking piece of it. They're trying to move the needle in whichever way they can. Okay? Iran is also obviously by way of Hezbollah, and Iran directly is also helping Syria. And if you want to try and understand it from like the perspective of Hamas, for example, during the initial Arab Spring uprisings, obviously Hamas itself is originally a Muslim Brotherhood movement. So they're like Sunni Fundis as well. They're Sunni fundamentalists themselves. In its, as an initial movement, it was a Muslim Brotherhood cutout. So they literally originally were like in support of the Syrian revolution against the Assad regime. So then they kind of had a period of not really fucking with the Syrian government. And the Syrian government definitely never forgot that and was like, yo, fuck you guys for, being along, siding with these guys. Like, some of these dudes are ISIS, you fucking piece of shit. And then they were like, well, we don't care. You're being a fucking, stop being cruel, stop being brutal. Even though they originally literally had their headquarters in Syria as well, Hamas, I mean, and then Hamas had to pack up shop and basically move from Syria to Qatar. But now their relationship has actually normalized between Syria, and also the relationship between Hamas and Syria has also normalized. The problem, however, is that it's not like Syria is offering a tremendous amount of funding or helping the Hamas militancy against Israel either, because they have their own shit going on. And ultimately, the worst part about it is that the worst thing that's going to happen is, of course, to the Syrian population, as always, they're just going to get fucking, they're being tossed around from one brutal regime to fucking ISIS militants. It's insane. So, yeah, it's a weird situation overall. It's very chaotic. It's really fucked up. And I don't know where it's going to go overall, but basically everything ties together. Syria kind of ties everything together in a meaningful way because they need Hezbollah and Iranian support, but Israel has actually fucking killed and decapitated the Hezbollah leadership in Lebanon, and they punished Hezbollah by punishing the Lebanese civilian population by ruthlessly bombing them and killing them. So Hezbollah conceded and decoupled themselves from the genocide going on in Gaza, but simultaneously they're like licking their wounds and they have to do a period of reconstruction now. And in that process, they can't actually fucking move into Syria and help the Syrian government defend against, the Salafist uprisings or the rebel groups, some of which are secular too. It's not like they're all fucking Salafist either. And also Russia is too caught up in invading Ukraine and pummeling Ukraine into the fucking ground as though they're the bad guys in that process. And they can't offer logistical support and even air support to the Syrian government to overtake Aleppo once again, as they did in the past. But also Russia, it is very important for Russia to, not lose Syria, not lose the Assad government. This is why yesterday I was like, I don't want to, dive too far into it. But yeah. And Syria obviously has a bunch of different ethnic and religious minorities as well. So they're probably not exactly fond of the fucking, the ISIS guys taking over Aleppo. And the ISIS guys actually have a lot more media training now, which is kind of funny to say. I know they've separated themselves from ISIS. They've separated themselves from Al-Qaeda. They've separated themselves from Al-Qaeda and ISIS, but they're still fundy overall. So then you have all these like Christian Druze, all these other populations, and even the Sunni Syrians who are like, well, I don't want fucking ISIS. I don't like Assad either, but I also don't know if I want ISIS to fucking rule the area. So then you have this weird predicament where these guys are coming in and they're like, no, don't worry. We have our own press. We have our own fucking guys. We're actually going to be, we're the old Al-Qaeda. We're not going to run this like Al-Qaeda, but we might actually do Al-Qaeda. And if they do Al-Qaeda, it's not going to look good. It's not going to be good for all the populations that live there. It's a horrifying predicament. So Syria is an example of non-linear warfare. All sides are shit and allegiances are confusing and constantly shifting. The result is the Syrian people suffering while USA, Russia, Turkey, and others get to play with their weapons of war. Yeah, I do also, in a weird way, find it interesting. Like I do find it funny because like everybody always says I'm like an unconditional dick rider of the Turkish government and that I'm an Islamist fundamentalist, but the American State Department is on board with the Islamist fundamentalists in this situation. The fucking Al Qaeda guys. And they are not directly funding and facilitating the actions of the Al Qaeda guys, but they're doing it by way of Turkey. Turkey's a NATO country. Turkey also is bombing the Kurds, which many of my naysayers will say, Hassan, you love when Turkey bombs the Kurds. I don't. I actually very actively criticize that all the time. But also simultaneously, I'm not exactly fond of like I said, the former ISIS guys and the former Al Qaeda guys coming in and fucking shit up, and they're being backed and trained by Turkey. So I guess now all of my naysayers, now that the American State Department is on board, is going to say these guys are the moderate rebels. Actually, so yeah, the Kurds are good. Yes. So it's a weird situation, and we'll see how it develops. As a Kurd, I don't think America gives a shit about us. They just use Kurds against ISIS because they were not fundamental, that they were most ready to fight ISIS, and now just use them as a chip to reign in Turkey. Yeah, I've said this many, many times over. The rebels are almost entirely led by ex-ISIS members who have ethnically cleansed Kurds on multiple occasions, and Assad is incredibly cruel. Exactly. No good sides overall. None of the major players are doing good shit. So yeah, my new optometrist, his name is Bashar al-Assad. There it is. I have an announcement. I've been talking quite a bit about my new optometrist. His name is Bashar al-Assad. Okay. Lion of Damascus. Oh, I will not be playing the song. Are you fucking kidding me? People are already up my ass.
Their descent on Aleppo has been blistering in its speed, taking the Syrian regime and the world by surprise. Opposition fighters now control much of the city, and they're vowing to take the capital, Damascus.
What is that? What's that patch? What is that? Huh. I don't know. I don't know what that patch. Maybe it's Red Scare. Y'all, it could be the Red Scare. They could be Red Scare listeners. They could be fans of Red Scare, the podcast. Honestly, I don't know what it is. I don't know. I don't speak Arabic. I can't read Arabic. It just like looked weird to me. I've only seen like patches like that on guys that don't have the best opinions, you know? Yeah, maybe he has a helmet. He takes it off. He's like, "Remember who you're fighting for," and it's a photo of Dasha inside his helmet.
Next.
Stop doing purity spot. I think it's kind of funny to see American and Western media literally look at these guys going Allahu Akbar, who like openly have supported, but also on top of that, like engaged in what they consider to be global jihad. And I don't mean like jihad as in normal struggle. I mean like global jihad in the way that Americans presented. It's these guys that have done that and want that. And it's kind of funny that these are the good guys, the guys that actually have done that. And the guys that don't want to do that at all, those are the guys that want to do the global jihad.
So far, they've met little resistance, skidding cars in one of the main plazas in celebration. And in the advance...
Most of the rebels aren't ISIS, though. That's not what I said. I never said the rebels are ISIS. I just said that across the board, when people talk about the Syrian rebels, like, it's identical to the Mujahideen structure, okay, in Afghanistan, in the lead up to the Afghan Civil War, in the lead up to the USSR intervention. This is exactly what happened. Okay, that's what you said. No, I didn't say that. I actually said there are secular rebel forces as well, and I also, but a lot of the larger motion, a lot of the larger movements are coming from the Turkish-backed, Turkish-backed fundamentalist, former ISIS and former Al Qaeda militants in the area. Okay, their leader is literally a former, but they're not the prominent ones. They fucking absolutely are the prominent ones. What are you talking about? Come on, dude. Incoming Hassan, you can't use Afghanistan politics as a template to analyze Syria. Yes, you're not even wrong about that. I don't think it's a one-to-one comparison. I just think that America's intervention and involvement in the region is, quite similar. Wikipedia says ISIS is HTS's opposition.
Symbols and statues of the Assad dictatorship are not being spared, toppled wherever they once stood.
Yes, for the record, in the interest of fairness, they are not currently Al-Qaeda. HTS is not currently Al-Qaeda. It's just led by a man named Jelani, who is formerly Al-Qaeda. They officially cut ties with Al-Qaeda, but there's a lot of cross-pollination.
War was dormant, at a stalemate, but not anymore. Aleppo is a huge prize for the rebels, as it was a major center of power for the regime.
To see the entire city fall in 20...
They have purged most Al-Qaeda members as well. I don't think I would go that far. Their leader has purged Al-Qaeda members from HTS. They're trying to pull moderate for unity. I don't think I would go that far. Their leader is also former Al-Qaeda, and I don't think that they have reformed or anything. I think that Jelani has said he no longer wants to do global jihad. He was mistaken. He does not want to fight the West. And I think the reason why he says that is because he's getting funded by the Turkish government. He's getting help from the Turkish government, a NATO ally. And that is a way for the American government to not directly fund former Al-Qaeda militants that they still consider to be on the terror watch list, but it's actually a cutout operation. That's why NATO is very important. That's how NATO works. You get your NATO ally to do the dirty work for you that you would normally want to do directly, but you can't do it directly because then it's like, whoa, what about the rule-based international order? Like, what's going on? It's kind of weird. Why are you giving these guys direct funding and money and weapons and training? I don't really get it. And then they can say plausible deniability. We're not actually directly funding them. It's actually Turkey that's directly funding them. And it's weird because ISIS has also duked it out in a certain, like, because of the infighting between ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and also HTS, even given their I wouldn't say ideological differences, but given the power vacuum that was created in the region due to this instability, they have at times fought one another. It's like ISIS also operates within ISIS has literally fucking blown up targets inside of Turkey. So while at the same time, Turkey is like looking at all these fucking Salafist militias and going, great, let's train them. Okay, let's give them weapons. Some of the other groups that fight with one another from time to time in the power vacuum also end up fucking attacking Turkey as well. So it's a little bit more complicated than just these guys hate these guys. They never actually fucking align with one another on anything. That's why I gave you the example of the Kurdish militia forces that are also backed by and offered logistical support. But like literally, they are the American militias on the ground. Okay, the Kurdish militias are American forces on the fucking ground, basically. They were most successfully utilized against ISIS in the region. That is before we even talk about like ISIS's inception. There's a lot of American intervention and involvement in the ISIS's inception as well. But that's besides the point. At this, in this analysis, that has no, that's unimportant. Anyway, let's continue.
4 hours, as we did yesterday.
The Kurds are not backed by anyone. That's completely untrue. The Kurds were originally backed by America, but once again, the United States of America loves to give Kurdish militias weapons and training and then literally leave them out to die in the hands of the Turkish government very quickly after they're done using them. So you're wrong on that front as well. Not only are you wrong, I have literally had someone who went and fought in Rojava on this fucking broadcast, a good friend of mine. His name is Brace Belden. So not only are you wrong, but also you're so wrong that you're, denying reality, but also I have a more personal understanding of what exactly took place there. Okay. Kurdish people, Kurdish militias in the region are America's greatest weapon. They're a stateless people. It's understandable. They have an understandable desire for having a state of their own, 35 million in diaspora. Americans love going to them and going, hey, you guys have reasonable demands. You want to make a state for yourself? Well, guess what? We're going to offer you weapons. We're going to give you training. Go fucking, and then we're going to sick you on whoever the fuck we want to destabilize the area a little bit, or even use you as a group that will engage in a cleanup job to take care of our former problems with ISIS, for example. And then once we're done, you're done. Once we're done, hey, peace. Have fun. That's the American attitude, usually. They'll go, hey, we gave you the weapons, we gave you the training. All right, now fuck off. And then the Turkish military comes in and just like fucking starts bombing villages. That's usually how it goes with the American involvement with the Kurds.
Today is, I mean, beyond dramatic. It's like an earthquake in the scale of the last 13, 14 years of the Syrian crisis.
It is uncertain when this lightning attack will end.
Can you give one example of when they went somewhere on the U.S.'s order? Wait, what? You're making the SDF sound like mercenaries, but I'd like an example of where they went that they weren't interested in going already. Okay, I think one of the things that people refuse to understand, is that something that I always talk about is the valid concerns that people have. Okay? That's why I brought forth the understandable desire of Kurdish people to have their own nation state. Okay? 35 million in diaspora. So they have an understandable desire, which is why they're aligning with America, even if they don't agree with America. Okay? I'm not saying that these guys are being utilized as a mercenary that is being directed towards whatever America wants to. America just understands that they can use the Kurdish militias in their just cause or in their understandable desire for, building a nation state to its advantage to use it against America's other enemies in the region or to engage in destabilization. This does not mean that America goes, hey, Kurds, go and fucking pack these people up. Okay? That's not what I'm saying at all. I've never said that. It's more so a age-old colonial ambition, which is to use sectarian infighting that is organic and naturally occurring in the region or any sort of instability to your benefit. As a matter of fact, I've even brought forth the reasonable and very valid concerns that many Syrians had with the Assad regime at the time that turned very quickly into something that maybe wasn't so reasonable or wasn't so honest in terms of these ISIS and Al-Qaeda style groups basically taking advantage of that instability. So that's it. Same with Hong Kong. Like, I totally understand why you would not want additional draconian measures implemented. Okay. Especially if you're a young guy in Hong Kong, you're like, oh, fuck, I'm terrified of the Chinese government coming in. Okay. You're not immediately thinking, oh, we're going to have more high speed rail, maybe even better, maybe even more housing units or whatever. You are understandably frustrated because the Chinese government is pretty fucking restrictive. Okay. That's just the truth. So you might have a real interest in protesting against this intervention. Okay. But that doesn't mean that other states that have an interest in destabilizing won't use that valid protest to their own advantage. What I'm describing is so commonplace in the entire region of the Arab Spring that what's his name wrote a really good book about this in particular. It happened in Brazil as well. It happens all around the world. The guy, Vincent, yes, thank you. Vincent Bevins wrote a book about this. He wrote Jakarta Method as well. But he wrote another book recently about specifically this. I believe it was called, yes, If We Burn is the name of the book, where he talks about how protests happen naturally and organically when people are frustrated with their governments, and then foreign actors will take advantage of that, or nascent fascist movements and nascent reactionary movements, oftentimes even backed by foreign actors, will then go in and co-opt the protest to turn it into something different. Okay? This has happened time and time again. This has happened in Syria. This has happened in most of the Arab Spring uprisings, and there's a reason why. Like America, for example, doesn't see Sisi in a similar fashion to the Assad regime, right? Because there was a real popular uprising backed by the Muslim Brotherhood, and it was squashed very violently. But it was squashed by our guys. It was squashed by our friends, our allies. So there's not much stink about that sort of thing. Whose responsibility is to make concessions to prevent this sort of divide and conquer methods from working? Anyway,
It started just a few days ago, with the rebels quickly moving through the countryside. The people here can't believe how suddenly it's changed.
We suffered greatly in the refugee camp, complaining to God. But when I returned yesterday and today to the village and found it liberated...
Wait, people want to cancel me for what Jank said about trans people? That's funny. Good luck.
It was an indescribable joy.
The landscape here has been pummeled by artillery with smoke and the sound of shelling echoing across the horizon. The opposition, backed by Turkey and led by the Islamist group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, say the offence has been launched to stop government airstrikes on its territory in northwest Syria.
We in the Military Operations Department stand up to our responsibilities to put an end to the transgressions of this criminal regime and protect our people.
The attack shows the weakness of President Assad's regime.
Bro, that's the quickest way. That is the quickest way to get a fucking ankle injury, okay? How are you not gonna fucking zip it up all the way, dog? You're gonna break an ankle, 100%. They also compared your platforming Christian Walker to Bonarelli Bonerbox laughing with Elon Levy. Yeah, talk to me when Christian Walker has done propaganda for a genocidal state and paid for a genocidal state to do genocidal propaganda. Yeah, I think there's levels to it, right?
The attack shows the weakness of President Assad's regime as its allies fight in other wars. With Russia bogged down in Ukraine and Iran and its proxies weakened in the conflict with Israel, Syria's dictator has been left exposed. Syrian and Russian jets are now launching heavy counterstrikes. This is the aftermath of an assault on central Aleppo. The ground is covered with blood. For the last few days, opposition fighters have been virtually unopposed. But President Assad's government says it's temporary and is vowing to push them back.
These fighters have reignited Syria's civil war. A loose coalition of jihadist and secular rebels whose lightning advance poses the biggest challenge to President Assad in many years. Their prize, Aleppo, Syria's second biggest city, retaken by the government in 2016 and now back in opposition hands. Last night they tore down a statue of Hafez Assad, founder of the ruling dynasty. His son and successor Bashar has used chemical weapons against his own people. And this victory comes after almost 14 years of fighting, with hundreds of thousands killed and millions of refugees.
It's also kind of funny because, like, on the one hand, like, Turks fucking hate the Syrian refugees. Like, they fucking hate all of the Syrian refugees, and they automatically are like, oh, if you're a refugee from Syria, like, you're a fucking Islamist fundamentalist, you're a Sharia guy, okay? You're Mr. Sharia, okay? And you came to tarnish my secular nation of Turkey. But then also at the same time, they celebrate the rebel groups that Turkey funds and trains. Very interesting predicament.
I am back in Aleppo for the first time in 8 years, says this fighter. 8 years of the Assad family and their criminal machine. This was a statue of the president's brother, a rerun of the Arab Spring by the looks of it. Jihadists are once again in the vanguard here, some of them previously affiliated with Al-Qaeda. Their leader is widely designated as a terrorist, but to many living in these battlegrounds, he's no worse an option than President Assad.
We enter Aleppo as liberators, God willing, to end the oppression.
Interesting how some Syrian anti-government militants mix Islamist slogans with pan-Turkish symbols like the Grey Wolves flag, signaling Turkish influence. Erdogan prioritizes pressuring Assad on normalization, refugees, and countering Kurds over direct confrontation with Iran. Yeah, so that's the other part of this, is that there's a lot of Turkic brigades involved in this as well. And beyond, so there's also... Dude, it's when anything that Turkey is involved in is going to be literally incomprehensible. Okay? Anything that Turkey is involved in is going to be fucking comprehensible. Because on the one hand, Turkey is normalizing relations with China and is engaging in economic development with both China and Russia. Okay? Turkey has economic partnerships with Russia and economic partnerships with China. On the other hand, some of the Turkic brigades that they have actually, that they've actually funded and actually offered logistical support to and actually trained are literally the Uyghurs in Xinjiang that the Chinese government declares separatist Islamist fundamentalists that must be violently purged. So, and also on the other side, some of the groups that they're funding and training that are involved in the opposition to Assad are directly fighting against Russian interests in the region too. So Turkey, while it is a NATO ally, and basically the American State Department utilizes Turkey as an outsourcer, a subcontractor that is one step removed from the United States of America, so they get to do this kind of stuff like with direct involvement, for example. They're still working at the behest of the United States interests in the region. Yeah, I think this is also true. Turkey might. I'm not entirely certain, but I think Turkey is the only NATO nation that has actually successfully shot down a Russian fighter jet. So there's also that as well. There's that little situation. It's truly fucked on every angle.
Of the people. Advise all our brothers not to enter people's homes. It is essential that there are no violations.
The Syrian government says its army has made a tactical retreat.
What is this? Russia, Ukraine is losing ground. The European continent is divided. America is preoccupied with domestic issues. All of our historic enemies are out of the picture. War Monitor says Russia stabbed in the back by Turkey. Who would have thought? Dude, it's a very weird situation because, like I said, it's not like it's a weird situation because Turkey once again is not only at the table but is directly the table. Okay, this is the least nationalist Turkish man. Yeah, Turkey is not only at the table, Turkey is the table once again.
To prepare a counterattack. But it's clearly abandoned both weapons and ammunition in a hurry. And Iran's pledge.
I'm wondering how a lot of people who are my naysayers because of my anti-NATO position, I wonder how they're going to fucking square the circle. You know what I mean? I really do feel bad for them because they have to assume this weird stance now where they're like, no, actually the fucking former Al-Qaeda ISIS rebel groups that Turkey is funding are the good guys in this process. And Hassan is critical of Turkey's involvement in this, but that goes against my previous programming that I said Hassan is unconditionally pro-Turkey. Perhaps they just won't talk about it at all because it doesn't suit their purpose.
Military support could mean little when both the regime and its affiliate Hezbollah are still reeling from airstrikes launched by Israel. So Assad also has the Russians on his side, and their jets have now bombed Aleppo for the first time in 8 years. Devastating Russian firepower drove the rebels out in 2016, and any distraction caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine may prove short-lived. Some of these rebels are backed by Turkey, which says it wants to protect Syrian civilians from the Assad regime. But nobody really controls these groups, and they're rapidly advancing.
Yo, dude, it's evil Brace. It's evil Brace. Oh no, there are Brace Beldens. There are Brace Beldens all around for those with eyes to see. Oh no, it's Dark Belden.
Through small towns and villages towards the city of Hama, where an earlier uprising against Assad was brutally suppressed. This afternoon they captured Aleppo's airport, thumbing their noses at President Assad pictured above the main door. Syria's leader is thought to be visiting Moscow.
The HTS has stated they don't support Gaza, etc. Wow, I'm shocked. Wow, that's really interesting. One must ask the question why so many of these Salafist groups who are supposed to be the Islamist fundamentalists that are quite literally presented as the Hamas alternative by Western media, seemingly always find themselves not at odds with Israel, but directly in coordination with Israel. Yeah, they're against Israel's enemies. Okay, This doesn't mean that the Assad government has offered like a tremendous amount of support to Hamas, by the way. They have not. Or historically, they have done more, I think. But in the last couple of decades, especially since the civil war and Hamas's initial support for some of these groups that were rising up against Assad, made Assad go, "Oh, you guys are fucking fake friends." But yeah, when people say like, it's a very weird situation because people will be like, "Oh, dude, you're a Zionist if you fucking if you say anything bad about Assad, like you must be a Zionist. Like these guys are, Assad has been so helpful to the Palestinian cause." And it's like, I don't know if that's true. You know what I mean? Like, so there's a lot of people, this was like a very hot button issue. And there's a lot of people who were very invested in what took place in Syria. But, I assume those guys are going to come back and pop off quite a bit on every side of this conflict. But
where he's no doubt urging Vladimir Putin to come to his assistance. The rebels also filmed themselves releasing jubilant prisoners from one of Aleppo's jails in what is an astonishing revival of Syria's long-running revolution. In the last few days, these fighters have ended the last 8 years of government rule here, forcing one of the world's most repressive regimes into retreat. That regime is responding predictably tonight by opening fire on protesters in Daraa.
It is pretty crazy that they're like, it is pretty crazy that the coverage of of former ISIS and Al-Qaeda militants is like so positive, Yeah. Yeah. Rafat said Assad is a maniac, as all Israeli leaders. Yeah. Shouts out to Rafat. Rest in power. Assad is as maniac as all Israeli leaders, he says. She's a piece of shit. Her call for free Syria, all while supporting genocide against Palestinians, makes her worse. Ignore.
Province. Though remarkably, the city of Hama now seems to have fallen to the rebels without much of a fight. And there are even reports of clashes in Damascus, the capital itself.
Wait, did you say the Syrian rebels were ISIS fighters? Oh my God. Oh God, I can't wait for that American Enterprise Institute twink to come after me to be like, yeah, these former Al-Qaeda and ISIS, some of the Syrian rebels, and it's not just my statement, it is just objective fact, also reiterated by fucking Channel 4, are yes, former Al-Qaeda and former ISIS militants.
Joining me now is Fuad Syed Issa, who's a Syrian activist and founder of Violet, an organisation which supports human rights and refugees in Syria. Fuad, I know you're in touch with people in Aleppo and other cities in Syria. What are they telling you about what is going on the ground?
Yeah, thank you so much. Actually, our team in Violet arrived to Aleppo.
Once again, I am offering nuance to the subject matter. I am not in favor of Assad either. I'm not saying that the Assad government has been good. I'm not saying that at all. They are brutal, repressive, very violent, okay? Popular mobilization is often utilized by actors that don't have the same interests or don't have a genuine emancipatory interest at all and just simply want to take advantage of the chaos.
This morning, and they start their response from the early morning when it's all under rebels' control, the Syrian rebels' control, and many attacks happening from the morning with aircraft, the Russian and Syrian aircraft to Aleppo city, and it's a very crowded city around. I mean, 1 million of people are living in there, and the people are scary from this bombing and chilling in the area. Our humanitarian teams, Violet and the other teams joining the city, trying to help the people and to provide the immediate needs of the food and the water, because the people were stuck on their houses for 3 days, and now they need the immediate help.
I'll come back to the humanitarian issue in a second, but there's fighting beyond Aleppo as well. What are people telling you?
I think the things are changing very, very fast. The news from some minutes that they also take control on the Hama city, the third city in Syria, and there is fighting happening in Damascus now. the things are just going very fastly, and there is something happening in the area. Then, and also all of Idlib city and Idlib also governments are under the rebels' control today. And also Aleppo city with the airport and also the castle, then everything around the area is getting under the rebels' control, and the people are start like to just understand the situation in this moment.
And so then on the humanitarian front, which is clearly what your organisation is trying to help on, you know, millions were already displaced since the civil war began in 2011. So what conditions are people now living under?
I mean, there is two ways to get the results from this fighting today. One of them are having the people back to Aleppo and to their cities, because there is around 4 million displaced people who's living in the Turkish-Syrian border, where they displaced from Damascus, Aleppo, and Hama city, and they could be returning to their houses if the things going well. The other way is more attacking on the area from the Syrian and Russian aircraft, and that will put us in a very huge we can say earthquake of displacement, new displacement, because there is also around 5 to 6 million in this area. And if the attacks like continue for some days, as we have the experience before, most of those people will displace to the borders and then will try to also be refugees in many countries around the world.
Yeah. And a lot of people in the international community had really sort of forgotten about what's going on in Syria. And I know the international relief effort hasn't been anywhere near fully funded, has it? What's your view on that?
Yeah, unfortunately, the funded for Syria are getting down all the time from the whole government. And the issue is like those people are living in the tents from around 10 years and need the immediate support. In every winter, we're coming to very worst scenario all the time. But the news today, if it's became in a better situation, that would help the people, the civilians, to get back to their cities, to their houses. And that could be a really great way supporting the Syrian, as well as we still need an immediate help and emergency response for the people who's getting attacked in the Syrias, in Aleppo and the other Syrian cities.
Fuad Said, thank you very much for joining us.
Today, the Israeli military said it launched a strike on military infrastructure at the Syria-Lebanon border that it claims Hezbollah was using to smuggle weapons. The Israeli military is also warning displaced Lebanese residents from returning south to more than 60 villages, 3 days into a fragile ceasefire agreement. But Israel is still fighting Hamas.
By the way, this chatter, they keep saying HTS isn't backed by Turkey. You are talking about the Syrian National Army, which isn't involved in this conflict. HTS is not formally backed by Turkey. They have refused to collaborate with the Free Syrian Army that is backed by Turkey. And on top of that, they have actually fought against one another. Having said that, however, they have also fought against Kurdish militias at the behest of the Turkish government. So you're both right and wrong. You're definitely wrong when you say the Syrian National Army is not involved in this at all. You're wrong about that. And not only are you wrong about that, you're so wrong that, I mean, direct media coverage of this that's happening is openly saying that the Turkish-backed forces are also absolutely involved in the overtaking of Aleppo. It's just that the HTS movement is the most prominent one, and I think is like the most media trained one, I guess. So they're the ones that are getting the most play. So you're not correct.
In the Gaza Strip, an Israeli strike killed at least 20 people, including World Central Kitchen employees. The Israeli military claims one of the men killed was an October 7th attacker. Deborah Pata is live in Jerusalem. Deborah.
Yeah. There have been moments where they have been opponents to Turkey and also aligned with Turkey.
Good morning.
You sound downplaying Assad's crimes and horrors. Wait, what? No, I'm not doing that. You're hearing that because that's what you want to hear. I have maintained the position that virtually every side in this, with like some exceptions from the Kurdish militia movements, is objectively not very good guys. They're very bad guys.
A very good morning. Well, this is the second time World Central Kitchen workers appear to have been killed in an Israeli strike. The last one was in April, which killed 7 staff members. In a rare admission of guilt, Israel called that attack tragic and unintentional.
Today's early morning strike ripped through the vehicle, which appeared to be part of a convoy transporting food supplies. Strewn among the twisted metal, onions and potatoes. An eyewitness told CBS News that when 2 rescue workers came to recover the bodies, they were killed in a second hit. Among the dead, the much-loved Azem Abu Daka, who ran the World Central Kitchen in the south. Across much of Gaza, nothing has changed in nearly 14 months. Palestinians still face relentless Israeli bombardment. Abud's brother was killed in a strike in Nuseirat. He was just walking down the street when the tank fired, the young boy said. His blood was spilled right here. Abu Khalid Shraim's wife was killed in the same attack. Hunched with grief, he wept over her body. Goodbye, my precious.
I wonder if CNN will talk about this. Yes, they will, because it's happening. Yes, of course they will. They will talk about it with very different terms. They will talk about Syrian people that are being killed in this, Syrian civilians that are being killed in this, especially with like bombing campaigns coming from Russian forces and Assad's regime, as real human beings, like the real human casualties, because they are. They just will never extend that same kind of coverage to the Palestinians, because the Palestinians are being killed by good guys. So that's why you don't see a lot of the same style of coverage when it comes to the metric ton of horror that Israel's unleashed upon Lebanon and unleashes consistently upon Gaza, the people in Gaza.
He sobbed, "Forgive me. Everyone here lives in constant fear that tomorrow might be their turn to bury their loved ones."
Oh, he's asking about the World Central Kitchen guy? Oh my God. Yeah, that's the other thing. Israel also killed 3 more World Central Kitchen aid workers and then claimed one of them was Hamas and also did October 7 or some shit.
And if Palestinians are not dodging Israeli bombs and bullets, they are searching for bread amid a hunger crisis that grows worse by the day. On Friday, as starving people thronged outside one of the few operational bakeries like this one, a woman...
Does all of this benefit Israel? I mean, I don't know. In the grand scheme of things, I think, despite Assad not necessarily being very helpful for Palestinians, he's still not in the orbit of Western control. Like, he's not in the Western sphere of influence. So I think ultimately he presents a danger. If you are unstable and so close to Israel, right? You got fucking borders with Israel. Israel has overtaken parts of your country and permanently annexed it. That is not in America's interest. It is, however, in America's interest to destabilize your country and use the popular uprisings against you because you're a brutal fucking autocratic regime, and use that to their benefit to either constantly have you in the grips of destabilization and civil war, or completely pack your shit up like they did in Iraq. And it's a bullshit. Assad is not stabilizing Syria. You're completely wrong on this issue. That's not what I said. But Assad is not in the sphere of Western influence, so it is a dangerous prospect for America's desires in the region, because he could, at a certain point, become a threat to Israel. And he is a threat to America already, given the fact that he collaborates with the Russian government. He collaborates with the Russian military invasion of Ukraine. Okay? So even though Assad has not been helpful to the Palestinian cause and has actually directly had the very same Hamas leadership that once worked outside of Syria, like had offices in Syria, have to leave Syria and go to Qatar after the original revolution, Assad has never really turned around and offered any kind of like serious logistical support to the Palestinian cause. They are, however, aligned with Hezbollah. Hezbollah has defended the Assad regime. in Syria in a very brutal way, as a matter of fact. So I guess they are kind of a part of the acts of resistance, if that makes sense, but not really. Like, they're aligned with the Iranian government, they're aligned with Russia, they're aligned with Hezbollah. They're not so openly aligned with Hamas, but those relations have been normalized since 2021, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if it was like 2021 or 2022 when they formally normalized their relations once again. Hamas and Assad, I mean.
And 2 children were crushed to death by the desperate crowd. They'd had nothing to eat for 4 days, a grieving relative cried. Bread is often the only food Palestinians can access, and even that, the World Food Programme says, is slipping out of reach.
The Israel Defense Forces told CBS News this morning's strike was targeting, and I quote, a Hamas terrorist involved in the October 7 attack. They say they are examining the claim he was a World Central Kitchen employee. Michelle?
Oh, that's cool. Okay, got it. Well, if they say so, then that is what it is. Yeah, that's the other part of the story, which is that so like Syria will only act as an active resistance member if they get something out of it, kind of thing. I mean, it's more complicated than that because, like, you know, they're too busy with their own shit. Russian foreign policy is so much better than the U.S. Wait, what? Where is this guy? Where did I miss it? What happened? Someone in the chat said Russian foreign policy is much better than the U.S. No, Russian foreign policy is very similar to the U.S. foreign policy. They're just a regional actor and not like as significant in the global stage. But as far as like Russian foreign policy goes, if you think that they're not also aligned with Israel in many respects, despite the fact that they also are very much interested in undermining American power in that region, and therefore sometimes find themselves aligning with Iran, for example. I don't know what to tell you. But, you know, Russia and Israel are like this, okay? They are. Russia might... Bro, it's like Turkey, okay? It's exactly like fucking Turkey. Turkey says a whole bunch of shit. Erdogan will come out and be like, I'm going to fucking invade. I'm going to use the NATO force to invade Tel Aviv. I'm coming for you, Benjamin Netanyahu. I call you Benjamin Satan-yahu. You're basically Hitler. That's what he says, right? But then they still fucking do trade by way of hiding the actual routing. And they still continue to do trade with Israel. They still continue to fucking use the Azerbaijan pipelines that go into Israel that actually allow the Israeli grid to power itself. Okay? So most of these people have incomprehensible views if you're looking at it. Like, most of these state actors do not have like a very well-defined framework. Like, I think America very obviously is pro-Israel unconditionally. But if you were to look at a country like Russia, or if you were to look at a country like Turkey, which is a NATO nation, as the second largest NATO military on the planet, okay, yes, while they simultaneously craft trade deals with Russia and they constantly talk a big game about how pro-Palestinian they are, they're not actually all that pro-Palestinian when it comes to economic interests. And even the fact that like the FSA and other Turkish-backed militia movements also taking advantage of the lack of support that Russia or Hezbollah could ever offer to the Assad regime, like they moved in collaboration with the HTS movement to overtake Aleppo. So Russia is allied with BRICS and Iran against the US and NATO. Oh my God, he said BRICS, dude. Yeah, I'm bricked up too, brother. You know, India. BRICS is simply countries that are leveraging their BRICS is just leverage. It's just trade leverage for countries that are not immediately in the fucking immediately in the Western sphere of influence. That's it. It's not like ideologically bound by anything. It's just a way to hedge your bets against America if America decides to, you know, turn off the money faucet or something.
More now on the situation in Gaza, where an Israeli strike has killed a Palestinian man suspected of involvement in Hamas's October 7th attacks last year. Israel also claims that the man worked for the charity World Central Kitchen. Well, the US aid group has just issued a statement. Let me read it. We're heartbroken, they say, to share that a vehicle carrying World Central Kitchen colleagues was hit by an Israeli airstrike.
in Gaza. At this time, we're working with incomplete information, they say, and we're urgently seeking more details. World Central Kitchen had no knowledge that any individual in the vehicle had alleged ties to the October 7th Hamas attack. World Central Kitchen is pausing operations in Gaza at this time. They say our hearts are with our colleagues and their families in this unimaginable moment. That's the very latest there.
Turning now to the Trump transition. Canada's Prime Minister flew to West Palm Beach, Florida yesterday to meet with...
Everybody's kissing the ring. God damn, he looks like shit. Yes, I know Biden bought a 100-year war. I know. He exited Nantucket Bookworks, carrying the book, The 100 Years War on Palestine by Rashid Khalidi, according to a photo taken by a fellow pool member. I saw the photo. I posted it on my Instagram. It doesn't mean anything. He's just doing a fucking photo op. Bibi met with President Erdogan at Turkish House, New York, encouraged by the improving ties between our nations. And this is September 20th, 2023. We are committed to advancing bilateral relations in trade, economy, and energy. Thankful for our security services cooperation in preventing attacks and saving lives. Looking forward to reciprocal visits to foster this renewed partnership. That was, right before October 7th. Russia and Ukraine have a special relationship with Israel since Soviet times, but things have changed in the past decade. Israel is currently arming Ukraine. Russia is not selling weapons to Israel, and more Russian safeguards in relation to Israel are being removed. Last few months, they started intercepting Israeli missiles for the first time and so on. Yeah, but I think that historic relationship is still there, especially when you consider how many of the Israeli population is also former Russians or currently Russian. Like... remember at the time remember when I talked about how there are people out there who are both pro-Russia and pro-Israel, and it's like not as unique as you would think. The people who are pro-Russia pushing Z and also pro-Israel, those people exist. And they're not just like random people in Republican Telegram groups, right? That have been duped by a WhatsApp group and the messages they see there. It's actually a shit ton of Israelis and a shit ton of Russians as well. So the idea that a major percentage of the Israeli population being Russian is not significant in this analysis is silly. Of course, it's very significant. You called this months ago when the embargo was first talked about. Yeah. This is shipping data and satellite imagery indicates that a tanker onboarded oil at a Turkish port and shipped to a terminal in Israel. Yeah, I mentioned this months ago when I was talking to Jeremy Scahill. And because of the pressure that the Turkish government withstood from, popular uprising, popular mobilizations against the Turkish government for continuing trade with Israel, they basically turned around and hid that they were trading with Israel. Yeah, shipping data and satellite imagery compiled by researchers for a Stop Fueling Genocide campaign supported by the Progressive International indicates that a tanker shipped crude oil directly from Turkey's Ceyhan port to a pipeline near Ashkelon in Israel. The port is the last stop on the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline, which is crude oil being transported from Azerbaijan to Israel. The oil is then shipped from the Heydar Aliyev terminal at Ceyhan to Israel, according to almost 30% of its crude oil imports. On the 10th of November, amid global protests against Turkey's role in facilitating the shipments, the country's energy minister denied that any oil tankers bound for Israel had left Ceyhan port since Ankara began its trade embargo. But the new research suggests that the crude oil tanker onboarded Azeri crude in Ceyhan in late October and then turned off his tracking signal, only reappearing several days later in Sicily. Using satellite imagery, the researchers were able to track the boat docking at an oil terminal near Ashkelon, Israel. So they turn off their tracking signal, or another thing that the Turkish government does, and this is even more insidious. As far as I understand, what the Turkish government started doing is, we're not trading with Israel, okay, because we've implemented this trade embargo against Israel in aesthetics. So what they do instead is they change the target, even though they still are docking in Israeli ports. They say that it's actually trading with Palestine. So they change the destination to Palestine. Like they make it seem as though they are trading with the West Bank, but instead they're actually trading with Israel. That's another way that they try to hide the data. So if you look at the actual trade with the West Bank, with like occupied Palestinian territories, it increased dramatically after the trade embargo was the aesthetic trade embargo was kicked in. This is how it works. This is how people do it. This is how people maintain their important relations. What the fuck is this? Alleged sex tape of streamer Destiny and Nick Fuentes services online. What? I doubt that this is real. That's the most insane thing I've ever seen, dude. That's not. This is too much. No. That's that. Like, I mean, I don't even want to think about that. Why? Fuck. Ban whoever linked it, please. I don't think that is. This is. What the fuck is this? What? No. Stop. Stop linking that. Mods ban that. It's unsubstantiated rumors. Stop. It's not Fuentes from fucking Tristan Tate tweet. It's revenge porn. It's fucking revenge porn. Leftists fucking suck. Yeah. That's ridiculous. You're next, big boy. Yeah. You want to see how hard I fucked your dad's ass last night? Is that what you want to see? You're next, big boy. Yeah. I mean, if you want to see my fucking meat that bad, you know, I posted it the other day. You don't have to look for revenge porn, okay? Here, I'll pull it up for you. There it is. Here you go, dude. You can make out the outline and fantasize about it, okay? Dumbass. Say you're next, big boy. I am a big boy. Oh my God, 198,000 likes, 30,000 bookmarks. Yeah, it is a progress pic, but it's a progress pic that turned into a cock progress for some reason. Penile progress. Anyway. From progress pig to progress dick. Anyway, where was I? Don't you cringe at that? No, I don't give a shit. I grew up very, very fat. I love when people objectify me. It's really funny. Whenever people say like, the only reason why people watch you is because you're hot. I'm like, thank you. Thank you for saying I'm hot. You know, that's cool. It doesn't work in the same, it doesn't hit the same way when you do it. When you objectify a man in a patriarchal society, it doesn't hit the same as objectifying a woman. Okay, there needs to be a pre-established historical context and historical oppression associated with it. When you objectify a man, you're just basically fucking saying that a man is hot. You know? Anyway, marine shipping data revealed that the Sea Vigor tanker arrived at the Haidar Aliyev terminal in Ceyhan on the 28th of October and was recorded as heavier after departure. As the terminal is the last point of the BTC pipeline, and almost exclusively exports crude oil according to marine traffic. The researchers say this indicates the tanker likely onboarded Azeri crude. Okay. What is this? Cavernacle has this pro-Israel group is absolutely unhinged video. We might watch that later. But according to port logs, the tanker arrived in Sicily lighter in weight, suggesting that it offloaded its cargo between the two recorded stops. Using satellite imagery, researchers were able to identify the tanker docking at the EAPC terminal near Ashkelon, Israel on the 5th of November. And this is simply just the tip of the iceberg. The evidence for Sea Vigor is the tip of the iceberg in relation to the ongoing trade between Israel and Turkey. Middle East Eye previously reported that the advocacy group Oil Change International, which authored a report tracking oil shipments to Israel up until July 2024, said its data sources show multiple shipments from Ceyhan since May. Why do you think that Turkish people are more pro-Palestine than Azeri people? Because Israel gave weapons to Azerbaijan and the Azeri forces in Karabakh. And also, it's a very, very important, reliable trade partner. Israel and Azerbaijan have this trade partnership with pipelines that go through, the logistics that go through Turkey as well. And no, it's not just Islamists in Turkey that are generally more Palestine. That's pro-Palestine. That's not true. It's not just Islamists in Turkey. There are, however, definitely Islamists in Turkey who are very pro-Palestine, but that's not the only group that is pro-Palestine. Most of the, there's a lot of, there are a lot of people, there are a lot of people who are also leftists, even Kurds. Like there's plenty of other groups. It's the only time you ever saw, the only time you've ever seen flags flying for PFLP and Hamas at the same time in Turkey with the IP and, the Turkish Communist, Turkish Worker Party side by side with some of the Islamists. There are, however, a lot of secular, educated, Turkish liberals who are not rabidly anti-Palestine, but certainly anti-Palestine. It's something that I actually criticized quite a bit in the beginning. in the beginning of the Israeli genocide in Gaza, where a lot of Turks were like, "Oh, you want to fucking defend Palestine? How about you go there?" That's what they were fucking saying, because they're so anti-Arab because of resentment for the uprisings against the Ottoman Empire, collaborations with like British and French imperialists, Syrian refugees. There's just a lot. Anyway, I don't think you have to pick a side in this. What, in Gaza? Yes, you can. What do you mean? I'm anti-genocide unconditionally. You want to do a giveaway? We can do a giveaway. What is the majority sentiment towards Palestine and Turkey? It's pretty pro-Palestine. The majority sentiment is pro-Palestine. Turks are in a weird situation because they don't understand that the country is completely captured by American interests as a part of NATO, but they also hate American interference. That's why they'll be like, you're a British agent or you're an American agent. Like that's something that's like very commonplace. Like Turks will be like, you're an American asset, you're a British asset, you're an agent of the British. But like the Turkish government and a lot of like the ultra-nationalist movements are directly created by the American State Department. Amerikan Nusha, aynen. Yeah, you're a servant of America. It's kind of funny because sometimes they say that to me too. And it's like, dog, what the fuck do you mean? But yeah, the Turkish state there's a reason why the Turkish state presents itself as pro-Palestinian. And that is because of the massive amounts of support from the Turkish public. I haven't heard you say Azerbaijan since COVID, Lamount. No, I've talked about it. Bro, they call you gay in here? Yeah, they do. Why do you have a Cuba flag in the background? Because I love Cuba. Asked and answered. Because Cuba's fucking awesome. So sad that Turks who are supposed to be educated and secular don't know that an extreme minority collaborated with the British, consisting of two large tribes who worked with the British when the overwhelming majority of Arabs in the Levant and Mesopotamia fought with the Ottoman army against the British. Yeah. Which was also mentioned which is something that Joseph Robinette Biden is going to learn about, as a matter of fact, if he reads 100 Years of War in Palestine by Rashid Khalidi. Interestingly enough, it was also featured in the book by Rashid Khalidi, 100 Years of War in Palestine. If he knew how to read, he would probably read that book and maybe learn some things. Giveaways over. The Ottomans were also occupiers that oppressed Arabs and forced their conscription and very likely deaths in their wars. Listen to me. I'm not going to say anything. Who won? I don't know. I don't know who won. April says. Congratulations, April says. Anyway. So yeah, this is the situation. This is Turkey's involvement with Israel. Hey, yo, watch yourself. You were doing some weird shit here in Qatar, so we had to kick you out. What do you mean? I've never been to Qatar.
President-elect, who is threatening to impose sweeping tariffs on America's northern neighbor. Our Weijia Jiang is also there. Weijia, good morning.
Good morning, Dana, and good morning to everybody.
I'm Arab and he's soothing people from the Arabian Peninsula. Saudis, the majority preferred the Ottomans. My grandfather fought with the Ottomans against the British in Iraq. Yeah, I mean, look, if you're going to match up, the Ottoman Empire to like British colonial occupation or French colonial occupation, I mean, look at what's going on right now. Look at what's going on in the region right now. This doesn't mean that they were great overall. It's just, I think a lot of people would probably prefer the former rather than the latter.
Two leaders met over dinner at Mar-a-Lago, and it was a meeting that Canada sought out, according to the Canadian Broadcasting Company. Now, earlier this week, President Biden warned that these tariffs would be counterproductive, but President-elect Trump insisted.
Do you ever get tired of lying? Oh, God, class war is an instrument. Lying on your back while you get hit from Chat's mom? Okay, stop with the debate.
That they would protect U.S. manufacturing and bring even more companies to America.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's visit to Mar-a-Lago comes as President...
Easier to kiss the ring. Where's Assad now? People are saying he's in Russia. I don't know.
Elect Trump threatens to impose a 25% tariff on imported goods from Canada and Mexico. Trudeau has warned against the move. Both North American allies are weighing retaliatory tariffs on U.S. products. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum spoke by phone with Trump on Wednesday, but she said the issue did not come up. From world leaders to tech giants like ex-CEO Elon Musk, who spent Thanksgiving at Mar-a-Lago with the Trump family. The line to meet with Trump is long. On Wednesday, Trump hosted Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg at his Florida resort for dinner. Trump's incoming Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller.
We'll see what comes of that. And Mark, obviously, he has his own interests and he has his own.
I can't believe Cenk tweeted what he tweeted yesterday where he's like, oh, the establishment has failed. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how the fuck, I don't know how I don't know what to say about that. Watch the Jose video. It's very good and not too hard on TYT or anything. Yeah, I'll watch that later. What is this? Oh, that's funny. I've been trying to figure out why I'm more optimistic now than I was before the election. Even though I was so against the guy who won, I know now MAGA is not my mortal enemy and neither is the extreme left. My mortal enemy is the establishment and they have been defeated. Dude, to say that the Donald Trump administration is not the establishment is so crazy. Like they already ran the country. Okay. Not only did they run the country, but they didn't do a great anti-establishment job at it. It's like no different than saying, oh, Donald Trump is gonna fucking is no different than saying Donald Trump is going to drain the swamp. Just give your Twitch channel to Cenk. He owns you and is the left. He is the left. He is. I'm not. I'm not the left. Did he say other? It's not just that the establishment candidate lost. It's that their media is mortally wounded. Yeah. Fox News, on the other hand, not the establishment media, it seems. Good video I saw on how people get radicalized into reactionary positions and then can be de-radicalized. Okay. The source of their strength was not insipid politicians like Mitch McConnell and Joe Biden. The source of their strength was their propaganda machine, the mainstream media. Now online media is strong enough that their oppressive monopoly on American mind has been broken. Now we're in the jungle. They hate that. I love it. This uncontrolled marketplace of ideas is where I'm home. I'd rather be the populous woods than in the establishment prison. Is this whole meeting the new president-elect at their residence thing kind of weird? Is it more common than I realized? It's unique because we haven't really had a situation like this before where a former president who has already like established relations with these other global leaders before has lost an election and then won it again. So that's the reason why it's like it's both unique, but also it's not unique because it's Donald Trump. I think it's more so like, has it happened before? I assume it has happened before. I don't know enough. By the way, why does this have Roper Cleveland? Why does this have 68,000 likes? What do you think, dude? Because it's on Twitter. It's on Twitter. You say anything right wing on Twitter, you're going to get a lot of love. I thought we established this. Right wing, he is the left. I think he's booming out. Okay. He's just like, he has spent so much of his time duking it out with establishment Democrats for understandable reasons, because the Democratic Party is a direct pathway, a direct hurdle in front of any sort of leftist mobilization. And he sees them as his immediate enemy. But while I also understand where he's coming from on that front, I don't have the same optimism that he has in terms of this misplaced optimism that he has in terms of like the Republicans winning. They're going to fucking I think the Republicans are going to put the left in jail, you know? I don't think the establishment has been defeated. I see the situation as more uniparty than anything else. I see it as two sides of the same coin, with one side being far worse than the other for sure. But the side that is far worse than the other is not the Democratic Party. The side that's far worse than the other is the Republican Party. It's not like the Republicans hide their rampant corruption. Like, things might change, but not for the better. Things will change for the worse. That's the way I see it. I see it as like Donald Trump centralizing power even harder than previous Republican administrations have at the behest of corporations and the wealthy. And maybe he'll, throw some populist crumbs here and there in the process. Like, one thing that he actually changed was the messaging around deficit hawking and the messaging around social safety nets. Like, he was like, I'm never touching Social Security, for example. Right? That's new for the Republicans. Now, does that mean that he's not going to touch Social Security? Probably. He probably will touch Social Security as long as it's like in the interest of corporations. Lawyer up? Why? See Joe and Mika from MSNBC? Yeah, fascism has always used anti-elite rhetoric. They contort leftist critique into opposition to parasites, both unworking elites and unproductive poor people, reducing leftism to an aesthetic. Producerism. I don't know why he says this kind of stuff. I just don't like. I've known this man for my whole life. This is my uncle, so I just can't. I don't see him becoming like a right-wing grifter. But I totally understand why people who are unfamiliar with him or know his like perspective at all see this kind of shit and arrive at that conclusion. Maybe I'm on the copium train, you know, but I just don't think he's like, I don't know. I just don't think he's like, I'm too unk-pilled. I'm not like if he was not my uncle, if he was like some random content creator, I'd be like, he's going down the Jimmy Dore route for sure. Like that's what I would think. But knowing him personally, I don't think he's doing that. But, you know, only time will tell. Does that make sense? Just don't turn against us abolitionists like he has. I mean, the funniest thing is, like, if he's ever heard me talk to an abolitionist like Lolo or whatever, or even yourself, Cinemarxism, he would probably understand where I'm coming from a little bit better. But I also don't see any valid reason to single out abolitionists or anarchists in general to be like, those are my enemies, like to portray myself as like more moderate and more rational than they are. I have my disagreements. But I still understand that people like yourself are directly at the forefront of moving American society in a positive direction. I'm never going to fucking cast aside people that are I'm never going to cast aside people, even if I have disagreements with them, on as long as they are fighting the good fight. You know, this is one of the things that I have tried to maintain as a position, to actually create a big tent within some semblance of like anti-capitalist movement in this country.
Company, and he has his own agenda, but he's made clear that he wants to support the national renewal of America under President Trump's leadership.
It's a drastic change from Trump's first term when he...
You shit on anarchists all the time. What are you on about? Yeah, except I have a fuck ton of anarchists in this community as well, so I don't know what the fuck you're on about. Like, I've literally housed anarchists in my house, and I'm friends with them. Yes, I'm making jokes, but of course you're fucking anarchists, so clearly you don't understand the concept of jokes. You're about to be like, this is an oppressive hierarchy. Humor, especially when considering the ableist nature of those who cannot actually comprehend context and nuance, and humor devoid of tone indicators is actually an ableist reinforcement of unjustifiable hierarchies. We do not democratically agree on humorous quip.
Clashed with big tech companies and even sued several of them, alleging censorship.
We're going to hold big tech very accountable.
This time around, a long list of Silicon Valley billionaires poured money into the Trump campaign and flooded social media with congratulatory notes when he won. Chris Lewis is a tech policy expert who worked for the Obama campaign.
I think they're engaging in smart politics. I think what the public should see is that folks who have access often get preferential treatment from a Trump administration.
Elon Musk even scored a position advising the incoming administration as head of the newly created Department of Government Efficiency. He and Vivek Ramaswamy, who's a Republican businessman, will be heading down to Washington next week. At least they're planning to meet with House Republicans to talk about their plans to slash regulations.
Oh, God. Trust busting is when you like corpos bust in your mouth. Yeah, yum. Let's do the Jose video that I was watching before. Why the Young Turks push the right-wing propaganda story? This is what I was watching before we got to the Janksgiving. But here, I'll summarize the first 7 minutes, but it's basically talking about the right-wing backed propaganda story about a slumlord in Aurora, Colorado, that was under fire by the local government, okay, for having horrifying conditions in its slums. Many of the people that are living in these slums that this company was the landlord over were, undocumented and documented migrants. Many of them are poor. And the story was quickly put together by local news and mainstream media to make it seem as though Tren de Aragua, a Venezuelan gang, had overtaken this Aurora, Colorado's slum apartments by force. Okay. And the Young Turks actually leaned into that quite a bit.
81 charges and was scheduled to appear for a trial on August 27th.
I gotta pee.
And then again on September 5th for another 24 charges related to vehicles. All of these were for just one of the buildings, Fitzsimmons Place. With the building set to be closed by the city in 2 weeks, Baumgarten began to fight back by claiming in the media that the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua had taken over his properties and were preventing his team from performing regular maintenance at the building. This is where the gang narrative takeover first entered the media cycle. And to highlight just how that entered the media cycle, we can look at an article from the outlet Westword, which referenced an August 5th statement regarding the gang takeover from CBZ management that came through a Florida-based PR firm, Red Banyan. A quick look at the PR company shows us that they specialize in helping repair the reputation of people and businesses damaged by scandals, and they hype up their ability to place stories within the media. It does seem a bit strange that the property owner was complaining about not being able to afford to make repairs, but he somehow had all this money to hire a PR firm. As I pointed out earlier, these apartments were a complete mess before the arrival of any of these migrants, and the timing of these claims really gives the game away. If a Venezuelan gang was somehow preventing these apartments from receiving regular maintenance, it's a wonder that they were able to do this for years before any Venezuelan migration wave came in at all. As an interesting point of comparison, Baumgarten owns several other buildings in Denver, buildings, you won't be shocked to learn, that also have numerous health and safety violations. One of the residents of one of the Denver properties discussed the poor living conditions, saying, "What's going on in Aurora, that's essentially what's happening to their properties in Denver. It just hasn't gotten the same attention." By the way, this comment does come from a mid-September article, so I won't blame TUIT for not being aware of something that hadn't been published yet. Though all the other details I've shared so far were readily available throughout articles published in August. One of the major differences between the 3 buildings in Aurora and the other buildings in Denver, all in similar states of disrepair, was that in Denver, the city had not stepped in to shut these buildings down. And that might be a reason why there are no news stories about a Venezuelan gang seizing control of them. Baumgarten told this gang takeover story to his lenders, which is how they decided to create a report. Let's go back to the TYT video for that.
Now, the video that we showed you earlier was taken later in August. So even before that incident occurred, there were already concerns about gang violence. There was already a law firm investigating it on behalf of the lender.
The first major issue with this report is that it's specifically about Whispering Pines, not the Edge at Lowry, which is where the viral video comes from. The video really conflates those two properties in an unhelpful way, including mistakenly listing one of the residents from the Edge at Lowry as being from Whispering Pines, and I think it demonstrates a general lack of familiarity with many of the elements of this story. But to look at the details of the report itself, it was put together by the law firm.
Yeah. Not only that it was put together by the law firm, which obviously stands to gain from, lying in this situation. They're trying to build a fucking case, if not a legal case, but at least like a case in the court of public opinion, and massage the narrative that suits the obvious fucking landlords that have hired them. But also, I read Anna's Substack on this. Now, I'm not, I didn't even know that Anna had a Substack. But the reason why I read Anna's Substack on this particular matter is because my mom printed it out because she was confused and knew what my take was on this. And she printed it out. So I'm actually very familiar with Anna's commentary on this subject. And I know for a fact that it was actually filled with falsehoods. Anna Kasparian did something on her Substack when she was doing coverage over this that I've seen conservatives do time and time again. Take a bunch of real criminal cases and compile it together and make it seem as though this was all happening with the Tren de Aragua gang that was all working to overtake this apartment complex. There was, I believe, like 35 different arrests, up to 35. I can't remember the exact number, but there was like 20 to 30 different arrests that had happened periodically over the course of like multiple years. okay, that it happened in Aurora, Colorado. And Anna had basically compiled all of those arrests from local news to present a narrative that it was actually Tren de Aragua that was, dominating this specific apartment complex to suit the original argument that she had presented, that Tren de Aragua was like dominating this area. I looked into the actual individual arrests and found every single one. I found out that many of the arrests were for, domestic violence or, assault, battery, things of that nature. Now, these are still completely heinous crimes. Many of the people that she presents actually are not a part of the Tren de Aragua gang either. They're just like other immigrants. Some of them aren't even immigrants. And none of it actually showed that this one specific gang had actually taken over the apartment complex. None of the crimes that they were arrested for had anything to do with the Aurora, Colorado apartment complex being overtaken at all. And but if you don't dive in to the actual details and investigate it further, you're not going to be able to come to that conclusion. Fox News does this quite frequently. It's shocking when I see it from someone like Anna Kasparian.
Perkins Coy, probably said that wrong. Considering the dates used, we can infer that the report was put together no earlier than the first week of July. It's very clear that crimes have taken place, but it's difficult to parse from this report alone which ones were dealt with by police and which weren't, and which ones can be substantiated at all. Looking at the more obvious crimes, there was a case of assault in November 2023, but it's followed by this interesting line. We have no information on what investigative steps were launched or arrests were made in connection with this violent and unprovoked attack. It seems like something they might have wanted to reach out to the police about, but for some reason they didn't. There are much wilder claims as well, such as child trafficking, but there's no direct evidence of that. The property manager from Whispering Pines says they were told that by a gang member, but that's not really the same as interviewing the gang member. And it's also weird that a gang member would openly discuss their child trafficking plans with the property manager. But that's kind of the whole point of this report. It's not meant to be a listing of definite crimes that have happened that the police have ignored. Rather, it's something presented by a law firm asking the police to look into this without actually figuring out if the police have started looking into this or not. But the TYT video makes a much bolder claim about the validity of this report.
And the report was further confirmed by the Aurora Police Department, which is now denying that there's a problem of Venezuelan gang violence at this apartment complex.
The cops did not confirm the details of this report. The confirmation that's described in this video was actually done by local news, who had requested police reports from around the same time, specifically the report of a housekeeper being threatened. The most contentious claim from this report is about rent collection or extortion, and that's mentioned in the video like this.
The property has recorded footage of gang members knocking on doors without authorization or without any justification, attempting to collect rent from the tenants of Whispering Pines.
Even several weeks after this video has first went up, there is still no firm evidence that to any sort of large scale that this is happening. In this video, the only evidence that's really cited comes from the report. When looking at the report, the only real evidence provided is a story from the property manager and a single image of rent supposedly being collected. The law firm, I guess, might have seen more evidence than that, but none of it made it into the report. One thing that is worth noting, though, is that the man who the property manager consistently identifies as Larry is almost certainly a man named Larry who was arrested by Aurora police back in July. He has so far only been charged with menacing for threatening to kill someone with a gun. This news did come out a few days after the first TYT video, so it's understandable why they didn't know this at the time. But considering this report doesn't actually concern specific police actions that were or were not taken, I'm not sure why they were just so willing to go along with the narrative that this gang is currently controlling the apartment complex and extorting rent from people. The whole rent collection narrative never rang true to me because multiple tenants interviewed in these complexes repeatedly said that they were not paying rent to gang members. The allegations made in the report were a bit of an outlier, and I couldn't quite make sense of it other than my assumption that the report just was not providing full enough information. I believe this hypothesis was confirmed in a November article on the Denver Post. I'll read you an excerpt. Rent was not collected by gangs, said Chamberlain, the current police chief, last week. Tenants told police that some people would bang on their doors and wouldn't leave until the occupant gave them $20, he said. I guess it's possible these people are lying. I think it's more than likely that small sums of money were shaken down by these people by criminals, and that was construed to be some kind of rent collection operation. And I don't want to downplay that someone stealing $20 from you when you're low income can be a real blow, but it does not confirm the whole gang takeover rent collection operation that was being furthered by a property owner who needed some kind of diversion to hide the fact that he had let his property fall into complete crap. Also, one last note about that report. The law firm claims it was conducting it on behest of the bank that had lent the money to the property owners. Well, that same bank would then turn around and sue the property owners, so perhaps they were not entirely convinced of the gang takeover either. The second video that came out in October would repeat this claim that whether it was a few units or an entire apartment isn't an important distinction to be made, but that is very much at the heart of this.
Whether they had been taken over in full or partially, wherever you want to land on that, okay? Whatever makes you feel better.
I'm not even convinced that a few units were taken over, but the whole point of this narrative is that the owner of this property is trying to claim that the entire building has been taken over and he's not able to collect rent from anybody. The local outlet, Denverite, took a closer look at the arrest records of the alleged Tren de Aragua members to provide further details, and only one of those arrests seemed to support the takeover narrative. A man was arrested for entering the apartment of two other residents at the Edge at Lowry and threatened them with a gun. He apparently told the couple to get out and then let 5 men in. And there was a comment about how they run this place, although he used a word I probably shouldn't use on YouTube. And this man was arrested. Although an interesting detail about the couple is that one of them was also alleged to be a member of Tren de Aragua, and he was also arrested because of charges from a separate incident involving one of his former roommates, who he assaulted after refusing to pay his share of the rent at a different location. I genuinely tried really hard to find any evidence of gang takeovers, and honestly, this one case is the best I could find. And this was published well after that first TYT video came up. A single unit that was taken over with the perpetrator arrested by police. Now, I haven't inspected all these units myself, and I suppose there are crimes out there that may have been committed that no one has come forward and provided any firm evidence of, but at the very least, I feel very confident in saying that the property owner's story of several buildings being under the control of gangs is, at the very least, a gross exaggeration. Looking through these arrests, one other interesting detail is that for the November 2023 assault at Whispering Pines, the victim was identified as none other than Zev Baumgarten, the property owner who has neglected these buildings. I should make it explicitly clear that obviously this is not okay. Even though he's been absolutely atrocious to his tenants, that doesn't justify some guys beating the crap out of him. There was a man who was arrested for this assault, and he was identified as potentially being a member of Tren de Aragua. Baumgarten pretty much never does interviews, so we can really only speculate what this assault has done to his perception of what's going on in those buildings, but it is quite possible that the experience colored his perspective somewhat. And I should restate, regardless of any sort of assault, his negligence towards the property, including allowing conditions that increased the incidence of crime there, go back well before the Venezuelan people moved into those buildings. The Young Turks video spends surprisingly little time talking about Baumgarten, but they did have another group they dedicated minutes of their time to complaining about.
For the lefties who are watching this, who are concerned, oh my God, please, please, please don't report the truth because it's going to paint migrants in a negative light. The migrants are the ones who are victimized by this. So if you care about migrants, if you care about...
It's weird because, like, we did actually, at least on this broadcast, feature the migrants that are living in the apartment complexes quite heavily. And none of them agreed that there was a gang takeover. So in a situation like this, they were all saying, no, this is our fucking slumlord who's like left the apartment complex in a state of ruin. Yeah. If I have, on the one hand, a slumlord who has hired a PR firm that is in legal trouble with the local government, with the local authorities, for the horrifying conditions that he's subjecting his tenants to, so much so that, like, these buildings are condemned. And on the other side, I have the actual tenants who are saying, like, yeah, I don't know what the fuck this Tren de Aragua shit is. Like, yeah, there's gang activity in this area. It's a poor neighborhood. But, like, no, the real problem here is the fucking tenant. not the tenant, sorry. The real problem is the landlord. Yeah, I'm gonna go with them, like the real victims. I'm not just gonna fucking bring up the victims of this story to drive home a narrative that actually undermines the victims.
About immigrants, you should not want them to live under these conditions.
If you're pushing back against the demagoguing of immigrants, I just did that. That's how you do that, okay? But if you say, in order to push back against that, I'm just gonna pretend that no immigrant has ever committed a crime and that those gangs aren't here and they haven't taken over anything, you sound ridiculous.
Hearing stuff like this makes me wonder what portion of this video comes out of concern for the residents and what portion is being created to push back against annoying people on the left. I'm not saying it has to be one or the other, but it seems like a bit of both are clearly at play here. As someone who is annoyed by people on the left, I understand that impulse. And hey, sometimes it's important to push back against annoying figures who are making it tougher to operate in that space. But when it comes to genuine concern over these residents and how they're being victimized, I've already described a lot of context that was left out of that story. And more importantly, there was no mention whatsoever of what was going on in Fitzsimmons Place, the third property supposedly taken over by a violent Venezuelan gang. If you truly care about the residents in these complexes, I don't know how the story of Fitzsimmons Place can be ignored. So let's go into some detail about that. Fitzsimmons Place was declared a nuisance attracting criminal activity by the city in September of 2023. The city described how crime at the property had gone up 30% since 2019 when it was purchased by Baumgarten. One interesting fact about the nuisance notice is that it has a list of the many crimes that took place at this property in the preceding 12 months, including several before the arrival of any Venezuelan migrants to Aurora. And all of these crimes were before the supposed gang takeover began. The city would insist that crime is not the reason this building would eventually be shut down, but this notice does serve as firm documentation that this has been a long-standing problem at the property and isn't the product of recent immigration. And I really shouldn't have to say this, but if you're claiming that your story is about the crime affecting these people and the only criminals you seem to be talking about are the Venezuelan immigrants, you have more in common with the right-wing media when covering this story than you realize. By mid-August, before the viral video went live, Fitzsimmons Place would be shut down, leaving nearly 200 people without a home.
She says for the past 3 months, she's always paid her rent on time, but has had continuing issues with lighting in the kitchen and issues with the front door and pest control problems. Also, half the month of August nearly gone. Doesn't give her family much time to find permanent housing moving forward.
Listening to the stories of these residents, it's really heartbreaking. They were paying $1,600 a month to live in apartments that had serious problems. Speaking to CBS News, one former resident said,
"Our hot water is turned off every week. We have to boil water to take a warm shower, and there's a lot of rats."
Although many of the residents described,
Yeah, the crime is out of control, by the way, in this situation. Yeah. It's crime on top of crime. It's crime compounding on crime. The fact that they, like, not only are these conditions horrifying, but they were paying $1,600, sometimes upwards of $2,000 a month. Yeah. Is this in Los Angeles? No, Aurora, Colorado, my friend.
Lack of safety in the community, it's very tough to find anyone supporting the gang narrative presented by the property manager. In fact, following the evictions, the former residents of Fitzsimmons Place filed a class action lawsuit against Zev Baumgarten and his business partner. Notably, it's not the city they were going after or the police department. They blame the property owner for the problems in their building. A civil rights attorney spoke to local news about the issue.
They didn't have any excuse until it was leaked that Aurora was going to be condemning this building. Only just about 2 weeks ago did the Baumgartens and
we also obviously on this broadcast interviewed a Hasanabi head who was a former local council member in Aurora, Colorado, who had actually visited these slums before. So, you know, when you actually look at the real victims in this story, and also the real local administrators in this story, you get a very different picture than the story presented by the fucking landlord. Like, I don't understand. Like, I'm not saying don't feature the landlord's perspective in this at all. Yeah, it's still newsworthy to you know, say this is how he is defending himself. And it's also worthy of investigation. But if you hyper focus on what the fucking landlord is saying when their building is being condemned, if you hyper focus on what the fucking landlord is saying as he's in the process of having his goddamn building being condemned, yeah, and not necessarily like feature the actual residents, then you might as well just be doing pro landlord propaganda at that point.
Their companies hire a public relations firm to start pushing this narrative that the building was taken over by gangs, and for that reason they had to cease property management operations. But the reality is they had ceased operations long before this news leaked that Aurora was going to be condemning the building.
By the time the viral video came out, Fitzsimmons Place was already old news. And it's hard to say a gang has taken over a building that has been completely shut down. But realize when people are talking about apartment buildings that have been taken over by gangs, of the 3 of them, one of them isn't even open anymore. But while we're on the topic of Fitzsimmons Place, those 81 charges I mentioned against Baumgarten from the city were conditionally dismissed. Baumgarten waived the right to a speedy trial and must now reimburse the city up to $60,000 to secure the property. He then either has to sell or lease the property to a new owner, or bring the building back up to code to resolve the many issues it's facing. This needs to be completed in the next 6 months. Although the delay in the trial must be some kind of relief to Baumgarten, it seems strange to me to take that agreement because it seemed like the perfect time to present all the evidence of a gang having taken over a property because of the city's negligence. But instead, he is spending a significant amount of money to secure the building, possibly even more if he decides to bring it up to code, or he'll have to sell the property. If this deal seems a little too generous for the guy, well, I'll have a little more on that later. There is one section of the video that does come close to understanding what might be happening here.
Some of them are saying, no, the gang violence isn't the problem. The real problem is the landlord. But both things can be true, guys. The landlord being neglectful and not taking care of the building could actually attract more crime. That usually happens when gangs or criminals see a building kind of falling apart. They see it as an opportunity to come in and take over. And so I don't see that as, oh, well, it's one or the other. It could totally be both.
What bothers me in this video is that it really dismisses the claims of many of the tenants that are trying to highlight how the property owner has completely abandoned them. The tenants are trying to get people to understand that this isn't a story about crime, or at least it's not a story specifically about gang crime. And the reason that this story made it into the headlines isn't because gang violence is out of control in these buildings. It's because gang violence is being tied to an immigrant community so a property owner can scapegoat them to hide his own negligence. And that's the frustration being created by this video. Instead of focusing on the bigger problem making the lives of these tenants miserable, attention is instead being redirected to the more salacious story of a Venezuelan gang. That's probably why the tenants have been vocal after the fact, trying to change that narrative. But instead of highlighting the many stories of the tenants of these buildings, we instead get clips of Cindy Romero in the TYT video. Honestly, I'm not too interested in digging into the details of this lady because she's a private citizen. But what's more important than this specific tenant is the
only tenant that has actually gone against the overwhelming majority of the tenants that have said it's not the fucking gang activity at all, it's actually this like shit-ass landlord, was someone who was personally handpicked by a right-wing council member, okay, and was given a new apartment, okay? Just so you understand, this woman is like, do I believe her narrative that she has been somehow victimized by these guys? Absolutely. I do. I 100% do. Do I believe that there are, gangs, including but not limited to Tren de Aragua, documented gangs born out of American citizens and gangs born out of undocumented citizens operating in this area? Of course I do. I do. But it is impossible for me to contend with the narrative coming from one person when there is an overwhelming amount of narratives that disprove that person's argument. If she were to talk about her own individual and personal experiences, then that's fine. That's understandable. She has every right to do so. But if she's going to portray this as some broader narrative of undocumented migrants overtaking a facility in its entirety, and she is this standalone person, and on top of that, she's gotten a new apartment from a right-wing fucking council member who masqueraded as saving this person from the treacherous grips of Tren de Aragua. I get why. I get why she would have this narrative. What is this? Guess who's a hypocrite and is going on an anti-Semitic steak and kick stream? Ain't no fucking way. First ever steak poker night? Exclusively on kick streaming? No. Full circle. We literally started our friendship shitting on Kick and stake.com and crypto casinos. Look at us now. They'll just clip you and put this on their sub. Please just leave it. I mean, dude, what the fuck? I don't know. I'm sure there's a reason for this. Yeah. I'm glad that Ethan is appearing on non-anti-Semitic platforms like Kick. Holy shit.
Context in which she's being presented to us. And to understand why she's being presented to us in a specific context, we have to talk about a certain Aurora City Council member named Danielle Jurinsky.
Damn, Jose's done a thorough investigation into this, like, respect. He's bringing up everything that I fucking also covered.
Although she isn't mentioned until late in the TYT video, she does make an uncredited cameo early on.
The governor, Jared Polis, claims that the allegations are a figment of your imagination.
This is so wrong, I'm tempted to call it a lie. Although it could just be that no one really bothered to look up where this imagination comment comes from. Let's look at the full context of the quote here, though. This actually doesn't come from the governor, by the way. It comes from one of his spokespeople. According to police intelligence, this purported invasion is largely a feature of Danielle Jurinsky's imagination. That kind of changes everything, huh? He's not talking about everyone. He means the aforementioned council member Jurinsky. She is described later in the TYT video like this.
Some streamers have decided to smear the city council member who helped this woman, who's low income, move out of her home into a safe
She's talking about me.
place to live. And they smear the city council member, as racist because she is concerned about this crime that's going on. Okay.
Although I can't purport to be an expert on Danielle Jurinsky, I can give you a bit of background on her that will help clarify where she's coming from. On July 28th, I
don't know anything about some random fuck-ass Aurora, Colorado council member. I arrived at this conclusion not because of what she did in this process. I arrived at this conclusion by talking to people who were also on that fucking same council. Instead of just reading Fox News articles on this issue, I actually did do some deeper investigations, you know, whether it be featuring the actual tenants and asking them, or seeing the PSL, like local organizations on the ground, going to the actual tenants and asking who was responsible for their pain and their struggle, or whether it be interviewing, council members, former council members, about the current state of the Aurora Council.
There was a massive gathering of about 3,000 to 4,000 people in a shopping center parking lot where these individuals had gathered to hear about the presidential elections in Venezuela, many of them naturally being Venezuelans eager for news about their home country. The gathering alarmed some residents, and rumors began swirling on social media. One of the loudest voices was Aurora City Councilor Danielle Jurinsky. Jurinsky had already been vocal in the past about her displeasure for the influx of new arrivals south of the border. She is very much an anti-immigration city councilor. Her post on Facebook regarding this gathering was far more heated, though. In part, it read, "Thousands of these folks took over and completely shut down a part of our city. The police were totally overrun and were forced to get out of the area for their safety. A police car was shot up. This is the United States of America. This is your city. Please, please spread the word. This November's election may, in fact, be the actual most important of your lives, your children's lives, and your grandchildren's lives." The Venezuelans were not, in fact, taking over the city. And after the results of the Venezuelan election came in, they pretty much went home. Police would later clarify that while a gun was fired into the air at some point, a police car was not shot up. They also described how police were there for the entire event and didn't make any arrests, and that there were no reports about rioting or people being attacked or businesses being damaged. To be fair, there was a lot of trash left behind, and while that is a shame to see, it's also something you'd find after a music festival or a large gathering of people. But Jurinsky's comments weren't about littering. They were about a Venezuelan gang taking over Aurora. Jurinsky would later claim that this gathering was organized by Tren de Aragua and that it was some kind of test that they were running. This is the imagination at work in this story. It seems as though her attitudes towards immigrants and this apartment complex takeover were a perfect fit. Jurinsky did not enter to this controversy after helping Cindy Romero move, though. In fact, she very clearly went on record about it at least a week prior to that viral video being shot. Around the time of the gang takeover narrative first appearing in local news back in August, Danielle Jurinsky, along with counselors Stephanie Hancock and Steven Sundberg, also started speaking out for the property management company during a public safety committee at this time. They claimed there was a big gang problem in the city, and they didn't believe Fitzsimmons Place was being shut down because of code violations. Here's some footage from that meeting.
We believe that our opinions are not up for debate. This is our beliefs. The three of us believe there is a gang problem, a huge gang problem. That apartment complexes and areas of our city are being taken over. This is what we believe.
There was another part of this meeting where Jurinsky mentions the property manager for Fitzsimmons Place was physically attacked at the end of 2023.
And then the property manager was beaten so badly he was hospitalized last November, Mayor, and APD is aware of this.
It's interesting that Jurinsky mentioned this particular assault because it was detailed in that report I mentioned earlier that was sent to the city on August 9th. That supposedly details how gangs had taken over properties managed by CBZ. This video was uploaded on August 8th, the day before that letter actually arrived to City Hall, so it suggests to some degree that Jurinsky...
Maybe she just has a real investigative approach and found out about it by herself before this report was put together. Or maybe she's directly working in collaboration with the slumlords. I don't know.
He has been in communication with either CBZ management or the law firm conducting the investigation. Do you remember that settlement that pushed back Baumgarten's trial? The one over Fitzsimmons Place where he's spending $60,000 and might have to sell the property? An interesting detail there is that if you look up the actual agreement, you can see that it was negotiated with a city council member, Danielle Jurinsky. So apparently in some capacity, Jurinsky was involved in hashing out this deal that created the possibility for Baumgarten to hold on to his property. Just another interesting connection between the two. I suppose she could have been representing the city, although I suspect the city manager was doing that, and considering a few days before this agreement was reached, she didn't believe that code violations were the reasons this building was shut down. So I suspect she wasn't exactly holding Baumgarten's feet to the fire on this one. And of course, all of this was happening before that viral video went live, and Jurinsky presented herself as some kind of savior stepping in to rescue a tenant. Jurinsky has affixed herself to Romero and is frequently sharing the tenant's story. In one more recent case, she was literally coaching her on stage while she was speaking at a Trump rally.
The loud music, the destruction, the gunshots.
The PR company Red Banyan also has a history of using politicians for its messaging, specifically when it comes to this gang takeover story. Going back to when it first broke in early August, Republican congressional candidate John Frabicatore was identified by that PR firm working for the property owner as someone who was a
Oh, my favorite guy. The fucking ICE agent. Is slumlord synonymous with landlord? Yes. But slumlord specifically operates slums. So like low-income housing, oftentimes Section 8 housing, that is left in dire circumstances because the people that your tenants do not have enough financial freedom to get some sort of legal restitution from you. Purgatory!
Representative for CBZ Property Management. A quote from a 9 News article reads, Frabicatore said the city didn't want to arrest illegal aliens because of bad optics. And he said,
they always say this. They always say like, oh man, here it is again. The undocumented immigrants getting special treatment. I don't know how the fuck anybody could believe this shit, dude. You got to be a real dumbass to be like, yeah, some of the poorest people in American society also happen to be the most privileged. These institutions that are constantly trying to fucking defend them. It's so stupid. Cherry Court, thank you for the 5 tier 1 gifted subs, helping some of the less privileged in the community by gifting them some gifted subs, allowing them to send links if they choose to see fit. You can also subscribe in order to support the broadcast for $6 or for free with a Twitch Prime. Twitch Primes are free. I haven't done a fucking call out to subscribe in a while. Gotta remind myself and everybody else that we're doing that. They're not back. I'm not doing an ad break.
The property owner had invested in improving the building. Now, I'm not saying anyone is on the payroll for one company or another, but I think there is a confluence of interests going on here. We have a property owner creating a gang narrative in an attempt to deflect responsibility for his own negligence towards his properties, and a politician advancing their own career using anti-immigrant rhetoric. So we have two very self-interested parties using this story to advance their own careers, something that is completely missing from that TYT video. To be as fair as possible, there is a decent amount of pushback that comes from the TYT video regarding how immigrants are being demonized by the right.
And overall, when you look at the crime rates, we've been over this many, many times. I hate to break it to you guys, but native-born Americans, twice as violent, twice as many crimes as undocumented immigrants, and 4 times as many crimes as documented immigrants.
And that's great. I'm glad they did that. But this pushback is incomplete when they also don't show how the property owner is complicit in all of this, and also provide cover for some of the conservative politicians who are exploiting this crisis, and presenting a city council member like Jurinsky as someone who simply wanted to help her constituents. A little over a month later, on October 14th, the Young Turks uploaded a second video on the subject titled "J.D. Vance Interview Gets Tense Over Venezuelan Gangs." And this was not a great video.
The incidents were limited to a handful of apartment complexes, and the mayor said our dedicated police officers have acted on those concerns. A handful of problems.
Only, Martha, do you hear yourself? Only a handful of apartment complexes in America were taken over by Venezuelan gangs.
Fast forward to this past weekend, and you have Martha Raddatz say, no, it wasn't a big deal. It was limited to a handful of apartment complexes.
This is a strange reading of the words that...
Bro, they're not saying only a couple apartment complexes were overtaken. They're saying there were a handful of incidents and issues. No apartment complex was taken over. Why are you agreeing with J.D. Vance?
That were said. Martha Raddatz is not explicitly confirming gang takeovers of apartment buildings. She tried to clarify that there have been gang-related problems, but then she is misconstrued by J.D. Vance, someone who has, by the way, gone on record as having manufactured stories to spread anti-immigrant rhetoric.
I say that we're creating a story, meaning we're creating the American media focusing on it.
This is one of these moments that just seems like a breakdown in understanding what words mean. Saying something is a problem doesn't mean confirming how that problem is construed by the other party. Even if Martha Raddatz completely agreed with J.D. Vance here, is that really the extent to which a story can be confirmed now? A comment from a moderator? I'm not even really sure what to push back against here because there's no real substance, yet it's being treated by this video as some kind of grand vindication. I know this is a common talking point that's been circulated in right-wing media, but it's obviously been exaggerated.
The Aurora Police Department put out a press release about the Venezuelan gang members that they had identified and arrested.
When you look at the details of these 10 men who have been arrested, they don't really speak to any sort of extortion scheme.
Yeah, this is what I was talking about. She wrote this in her Substack. This is the part of the article that I actually had to investigate further. I never covered it on the stream, but I had to literally do a live debunking to my mom who had printed out the Substack.
Apartment takeover narrative. Many of the charges involve things like domestic violence, and several men were arrested over one specific shooting. There was a fight that broke out at a party, and there was an instance of one gang member breaking into the apartment that was occupied by a different gang member. While it's certainly conceivable that some residents at these apartments have been shaken down for money or robbed at some point, a robber might have even said they were calling it rent for living there. This is me being incredibly charitable, as it's hard to find firm evidence of any of that having happened, and certainly not to the extent at which it is being alleged by the property owner. In fact, the original video claiming the poor living conditions and violence had nothing to do with one another was part of the problem. And much like the original video, a huge portion of this video is designed to attack the left.
And I love how easily they just dismiss it like it's no big deal. Do we care about people or not? Do we care about people living in poverty or not?
Then the extreme left goes, aha! That's actually the landlord, and there's no Venezuelan gangs at all. Everybody's fine. No apartments were taken over, and we live in Shangri-La. And when the leftists see this,
who are they talking to, bro? I didn't even know they were duking it out in the marketplace ideas like this on their fucking regular broadcast.
picture, they think they don't exist.
I don't understand why this is part of the story. It just reads incredibly petty and meaningless to engage in this sort of thing. But as someone who considers himself to be on the left, I do feel like I need to respond to this. Point out that there are a lot of great leftists doing important work, specifically when it comes to this story. There was one underreported one I really wanted to share, and to be honest, it's a huge part of why I wanted to make this video, because this is something that was not widely reported even in local media. This comes from an article in Denverite.
Isn't spreading disinformation considered to be a form of hybrid warfare in the political science context? I don't think this is like a deliberate disinformation campaign, you know. I think it's just like people legitimately becoming more and more disillusioned and losing hope that anything good can potentially happen, and becoming organically more reactionary on a lot of these issues. How do you non-deliberately fabricate a story as a news organization? How do you non-deliberately fabricate it? You just fucking copy the notes of Fox News because you agree with them. That's how you do it.
Which provided a lot of personal stories of many of the people who were living in Fitzsimmons Place and how they were struggling to find rooms in hotels after their building was shut down. One way in which the city, I think, is to blame for what's going on is how quickly they shut down Fitzsimmons Place. Although there had been a lot of talk of it being shut down, the actual deadline to shut the whole place down was only a few weeks, and a lot of residents simply didn't have the time to find new accommodations. The city, for its part, offered to pay for hotel rooms for a couple of weeks, but residents were pretty much left on their own to figure out what was going on. Much of the work of helping these people fell on volunteers from groups such as East Colfax Community Collective and House Keys Action Network Denver. The article describes them as a group of anarchists, socialists, students, and neighborhood organizers who helped people get water, food, and arrange for their accommodations, making sure they had appropriate transportation and rooms booked so these families wouldn't be left on the street.
TYT did a few stories around the same period about flash mobs that ran into 7-Elevens and snatched chips and shit, and they literally have Fox News credited for photos with a piece. Yeah, I think that there are significantly more pressing issues that are ruining American society than a bunch of fucking people running into a 7-Eleven and grabbing, chips. That's crazy.
As a quick aside, I talk a lot about leftist politics on this channel, and I see a lot of questions about how people can make a difference in their community. And if you're someone who wants to make a positive difference in your community and you're not sure where to start, look for organizations like these. They provide community support to people in really tough moments of their life. And it's really so easy sometimes to make a positive difference. In this case, it was just showing up with some food and water and helping people get from point A to point B. And while there are annoying leftists on the internet who will say all sorts of obnoxious things, I think the contributions of
The La Cienega and Olympic 7-Eleven, it was literally teenagers on bikes. Oh my God. Someone needs to put an end to these teenagers, man. If they do it 3 times, it'll be a felony.
Leftists in communities often gets ignored and minimized. They're out there doing the actual work. And
this is why I don't shit on anarchists all that much, okay? While they do demonstrate record behavior time and time again in online spaces, or some of them do a lot of fucking, some of them are just like objectively annoying. They're at the forefront of this kind of mutual aid.
To me, this is what I think of when I think of leftist activism. This article is an important read as it puts a human face on all of the people, particularly those who were affected by this building that was left in disrepair and then was suddenly shut down. And it also describes how stories of rampant gang violence is stereotyping an entire community. To be a Venezuelan person in Aurora right now is to be associated with the existence of this gang, a gang that is incredibly small and has limited to no influence in the city. As an update on the other 2 buildings that were scheduled to be shut down, Whispering Pines and one of the buildings at the edge of Lowry are luckily staying open, and hundreds of more people won't be forced out of their homes. Even better, a court-appointed third party has taken control of these properties and will begin making long-needed repairs, something that should have been done for Fitzsimmons Place rather than having all the tenants be evicted. At least for the residents of 2 of the properties, there is some degree of justice. To clarify this just a little bit, The court appointing third party isn't part of any kind of settlement with the city, who had been threatening to shut the places down. Rather, this is because the owner defaulted on millions of dollars in loans and were sued by the U.S. Bank Trust Company, and the buildings are now in receivership. Also, I want to point out that the bank suing the property owner is the same bank that had that report commissioned about the supposed takeover of Whispering.
In my opinion, they're falling prey to propaganda, which is sad because I only knew about you when I started watching TYT. I stopped watching TYT after 2016. I started organizing since then. I've only gone more left, and I've refound you during your woke bay era. I've literally done the organizing that Jank argues that the online left doesn't do, which feels disrespectful to people like me. TLDR, I stopped watching TYT because I started reading Franz Fanon. Yeah, anarchists don't shower because they're too busy doing praxis. That's why they don't shower. I'm not going to shit on anarchists that much. I'll shit on them a little bit. Yeah, I don't know. It is kind of sad to see. Not kind of sad. It's just very sad to see. I don't know. I think this is why I always say, judge me by my enemies. Okay. This is why I always say, judge me by my enemies, because I think it's important to understand that if I have disagreements with people who I otherwise think are, on the same path of justice and truth and are doing their very best to fight for human rights, fight for emancipation, like, I'm not going to spend a whole bit of time shitting on them, even if I have disagreements, even if they're shitting on me. Okay. For years and years, I have maintained this principle, which is that, like, I don't spend a good bit of time talking about people that are, at the end of the day, doing a decent job, sometimes in combating right-wing sentiment. A lot of people did not understand this. Like, part of the reason why I never really gave a shit about Vosh and rarely ever talked about Vosh, regardless of the fact that he was constantly fucking ripping into me and presenting me as this, like, pro-Russia guy because of my anti-NATO position, which if he was a little bit better read, he probably would also arrive at that if he was ideologically consistent, was not because, like, I was scared of Vush's unimaginable intellectual superiority to myself. It was because I just didn't see it as a productive thing. You know what I mean? And at most, I only fucking joked about the lolicon, goblin porn shit and some of his high notes that I personally do love, because I do think he's a brilliant entertainer when he's not, when he says stuff like, I dropped the tactical N-word to show my interlocutors that I'm unafraid of them, or Tacoma wept. Tacoma wept lives in my mind permanently. I genuinely think it's one of the greatest, like, Aaron Sorkin-esque moments that organically happened. And the fact that it happened because Brace Belden, my famous anti-NATO YPG fighter friend, Brace Belden, was able to trigger him into having that Aaron Sorkin-esque Tacoma Web moment, is like, it's just Kino. It's perfect. And I would even go so far as to say the same about, like, Destiny. A lot of people, I think, in his community think that I didn't really fight back or push back against Destiny because I was terrified of his intellectual prowess. And moments when I had a much larger audience than he did, and still do. The reason why I didn't do that is because I saw him as a nuisance overall, and I saw him as a parasitic force tacked to my hip that was constantly just feeding off of clips that were completely out of context and creating an environment that was like anti-Hassan for no other reason, just being anti-Hassan. Like, that was the major coalition that he was putting together. But, like, the reason why I stopped the I will never talk about Destiny opinion was because he openly came out as pro-genocide and pro-Israel. Okay? There were a bunch of different things. That, like, Destiny and Vosh at different points had at a bunch of different points, both Destiny and Vosh had, like, defended some weird reactionary takes, had weird reactionary tendencies, especially a lot more on the Destiny side, by the way, than Vosh even, before the Israel stuff. But overall, it was like, as long as he's just, actively combating against, like, idiotic right-wing positions and, manosphere dipshits and any number of different intellectual giants on the right, it's whatever, who gives a shit, right? The problem is he also was seemingly highlighting and platforming Nazis, which I knew about. Okay, fucking white nationalists and beefing up their personal clout on the side, trying to rebrand them, advocating that these neo-Nazis were not actually Nazis to his own community in the process, giving their phone numbers to other prominent podcasters in an effort to reignite their career, and taking credit for revitalizing the career of Nazis like Nicolas Fuentes, and also simultaneously defending Israel and being pro-genocide. That was what flipped it for me, where I was like, all right, enough of this, like silence. I will go after him. Now his fan base might say, oh, dude, it's because he grew in prominence or some shit. He didn't. Okay. He hasn't stopped coming after me. The only thing that changed on my end was when he became a massive propagandist while still claiming that he was on the left. He became a massive propagandist for something that I consider to be unconscionable. A good part of his content is anti-Assange shit. I know. So for me, that's that's where I draw the line for sure. The reason why I brought this up right now is because I usually apply a level of grace to those who I feel are sufficiently anti-reactionary politics, anti-Nazi. If at any given moment I start recognizing that they are not doing that, then at that moment I'm like, okay, no more grace, no more silence. And I apply this standard pretty evenly across the board to people from many different walks of life, and to virtually every single person. A lot of people actually get mad at me for doing that, and maybe even look for some other cynical reason as to why I'm doing it. They'll say, oh, you're doing it for clout, like with the case of Aiden Ross. You're doing it for clout with the case of Asmongold. No, it's because I want to, I always will hope that people have the capacity to change, and they will come to that. They will come to these conclusions on their own. There's a certain respectability that you navigate with that is very liberal and self-serving. It doesn't move the needle on an issue, but you get a release from the exchange. So it's until you deem them bad actors, no matter the evidence. What? Past a certain point, you will never understand how it feels to hear an immigrant comment on reparations as if my people didn't march for his right to come here. It's deeply disappointing all around. There's a certain respectability that you navigate that is very liberal and self-serving. No, I understand the human condition, I think, better than you do. I'm not as sheltered as you are, I think. If you genuinely think that people do not have the capacity to change and become better versions of themselves, myself included, and many people in this community have gone through that process as well. I don't know what to tell you. Now, it's a foolhardy endeavor, and past a certain point, I do actually drop it. You say Asmon will change any day now, Lamau, but I think you guys, I think you guys failed to comprehend that, I'm talking about being charitable to people who make a fucking living shitting on me, Asmongold included. I'm saying you get a release from changing people and everyone else isn't wired that way. No, I don't get a fucking personal, oh my God. It's like saying no act is truly altruistic because you're deriving satisfaction from helping others. Yeah, okay, no shit, dude. Yes. You got me. Okay. Yes, I do. I do get some semblance of satisfaction from being able to convince people that they're wrong. Yeah, you're right. You arrived at a fucking brilliant conclusion. Does that change the dynamic at all? I understand the importance of solidarity. I recognize that, at least given the current material conditions and the culture that comes out of it, that America is inherently hostile to any sort of anti-capitalist sentiment. So yes, I will try to change people's perspectives and maintain charitability to the best of my ability, understanding that we do live in a white supremacist, homophobic, bigoted, anti-black, anti-trans, misogynistic, patriarchal society, and therefore a lot of people are going to never really examine the positions that they arrive at due to social conditioning. That's it. I get where people are coming from. I myself have had right-wing opinions in the past on certain issues. Here's me talking about trans issues. I saw this older TikTok that I reposted recently. Call me Nancy Reagan. Not this. That just popped up on my For You page, but here, I'll show you this. This is a great example of exactly what I'm talking about and why I'm always
changes in
charitable to
my own
people.
personal politics, where in some ways I've become, I guess, more radicalized throughout the years, but in many ways, like, way more tolerant. Like, I talk about transphobia a lot, right? I'm a cishet white guy. I had transphobic opinions 10 years ago. Many of my trans viewers even had transphobic opinions 10 years ago. Internalized transphobia is a huge part of this. Why? Because gender is like a very rigid thing that we associate with ourselves. Even though it's socially learned, even though it's an expression, we reinforce that through every facet of society. You can't play with Barbies, you gotta play with G.I. Joes for a boy, right? You gotta wear blue. Even though if you look at FDR, when he was a baby, he just looks like a little girl. Like he's got dress on, his hair is long. Those concepts have changed throughout time, but they become infinitely more rigid in contemporary society, and it's very personal to a lot of people, like what their gender is. So when they see someone break that false notion that gender is actually biological and is very rigid and it is very important to me, what the fuck, it breaks their brain. So that's the reason why, and trans activists say this all the time, the overwhelming majority of Americans and the way that they receive trans people, or the way that they think about trans people, is just, they don't really think about trans people at all. They just have apathy. You can go in either direction after that. You meet a trans person, they're chill, you start learning and developing empathy for them, or you become this insanely transphobic person like Matt Walsh. And luckily, most Americans are not like Matt Walsh. Right. But why did I describe all of this? It's because I personally went through that journey of like understanding and developing empathy for trans people and became an advocate for trans rights. And I think that everyone is capable of becoming more open-minded and reforming and learning new things, and had changes in my own personal politics, where in some ways I've become, I guess, more radical.
There you go. Chad is basically yelling at you for having a higher threshold. While I can find it frustrating, it doesn't mean that you're wrong. I didn't say it's bad. I said how it's not how most people are socially acclimated. People think you are wrong, but you just process things differently. Yeah, well, here I am making an argument as to why I have this position. That's what I mean. Okay? Online leftists abandon material analysis when they see a stinky gamer influencer that gets on their nerves. Then they use the student politics like an Old Testament weapon. It's a means of fake praxis. No, but I also understand where the frustrations come from. Also, you called me a liberal. That's why I was frustrated with you. Okay. But I get why people are frustrated. Why the fuck would you? Why the fuck would you not be frustrated when you see your favorite content creator, who's supposed to be the arbiter of all things woke, all of a sudden offering grace to a content creator who you know is like dehumanizing you actively? Okay, I get it. I know where people are coming from. Just don't call it a fucking liberal tendency, because it's not. You ever just have the stream on but not listen? I think many people in this chat do that. Until their entire content becomes fuck us on, you don't respond, and I think that's a good thing. Many examples, it derails your thing. You value every single person that disagrees with the take of yours. Yeah. I will say, however, that, you know, this is why we go back to judge me by my enemies, right? If you spend a good bit of time attacking the left over and over again, and the reason why we started this conversation is because we're talking about TYT. If you are constantly trying to farm an audience to show how reasonable you are by singling out like radical components on the left, on the extreme left, that you are actually directly at odds with, that you are diametrically opposed to show everyone else how good you are, and how moderate you are, how reasonable you are, then yeah, at a certain point you pass the threshold of no return, where you're no longer a leftist at all. You're no longer progressive at all, in my opinion. You know? Why are you avoiding my questions and shying away from addressing my points? I don't know, because you're probably fucking baiting me. Wait, you didn't actually say anything. You just said, why are you shying away? What? He means your haters say that. Oh yeah. So yeah, that's what it is. I think that there is, I don't know there's no exact science to this. I don't know what the exact point of the point of no return is. I don't know what that threshold is. But just like the Supreme Court justice once famously said, I'll know it when I see it, when talking about the difference between, you know, porn that was protected by the First Amendment versus things that constitute, what was it? What's the term? I forget. Like gross obscenity. Yes. Things that constitute obscenity that go past the point of just like regular pornographic material that is protected by free speech. I'll know it when I see it.
Hines, I want to include some additional context specifically regarding Fitzsimmons Place that has recently come out regarding when it was labeled a public nuisance in September 2023. In documents that were uncovered by 9 News, a report from a police officer and several communications with city officials show them repeatedly warning the property owners of the growing problem with crime as a result of the poor conditions the building was left in. Numerous recommendations were made to improve safety within the building that simply weren't followed through with. Police even made the offer of helping with security, but there's no evidence that they were ever taken up on that offer. I'm sure to some degree, police could have done a better job of providing safety for any of the people there. After all, several tenants had reported very slow responses to 911 calls. But what these documents do reflect is how the property owners were very much informed on the growing issues within their building and were repeatedly offered solutions and services to help deal with it, and then they seemingly did nothing to address those issues. The documents also make mention of an unnamed gang having a presence in that building, though there is no mention of any sort of elaborate rent extortion plan. The closest they get to that is that apparently after a shooting in October of 2023, threats were made to some residents not to speak to the police about it. And to reiterate, this report only covers Fitzsimmons Place, which was closed in mid-August. I do have one more update about Zev Baumgarten, and this is kind of an odd development. The guy was scheduled to appear in court on October 24th, but apparently the city hasn't been able to find him. Several summons were sent to the addresses registered to him, but they all came back saying that...
Well, when you got the fucking, when you got prominent city council district members on your side, you know, you don't really need to do that sort of thing anyway.
The addresses were not found. They tried sending the summons to his lawyer, but got no response. If anyone knows this guy, they might want to let him know that the city of Aurora is looking for him. And
it is crazy how above the law you are if you're rich. Like, it's crazy. You could just do whatever the fuck you want, dude. God, the American criminal justice system is such a joke.
And he has to appear in court soon. This video was not very fun to make, and it really seems like a piece of bait that was designed for media outlets to further the interests of conservative politicians and a property owner. While I don't think we should never talk about it, period, or pretend like gang violence isn't happening, not providing that additional context, I think, allows stories like these to perpetuate. Another thing that really annoys me in these videos is the ridiculous disparity in power between the two groups being complained about. Even taking the video at face value and pretending it's not leaving out important context that would dramatically change people's understanding of the story, you have, on the one hand, the voices on the right, which include Donald Trump and various high-ranking Republican officials who are in the middle of a political campaign to take control of the federal government. On the other hand, representing the left, you have some online leftists. After looking at all of the context of this story, it very clearly appears to me to be bait, specifically to get people talking about the date.
Yeah, that's the other thing as well. When you find yourself in the throes of reactionary feelings, okay, when you find yourself in the comforts of like reactionary thinking, right, you end up falling for the bait over and over again. And this was something that I talked about with respect to Anna Kasparian when she was talking about like the other hole or the third hole or whatever the fuck that like random nonsensical Daily Wire or not Daily Wire, Daily Mail argument was. Republicans, like the Republican media especially, like to focus on random nonsensical shit that is not actionable, that is not meaningful, that is silly. Like it's just a simple afterthought, right? And then they try to present the entirety of the left as this thing, right? Bonus hole, I think was what it was, or birthing person as a term, right? Things that are born out of academia or things that are only utilized in hyper-specific medical settings that Republicans like to grab onto and then act as though this is what the left wants. This is the entirety of the left. No, not academic bonus hole. I'm talking about birthing persons, obviously, when I say like things that are relegated to the academic settings or whatever. And when I hear a story like that, I just laugh. I'm like, yeah, that sounds dumb as fuck. And I'm sure when I say that, there are people who get mad. You know, there are people who get mad at me and they're like, oh, that's a little transphobic. Like trans men can give birth too. And I know that they can. in very, very specific circumstances where they can't take HRT any longer. You know what I mean? It's like one out of hundreds of thousands, not millions of trans people have ever actually, done this. And I don't think that this is something that even trans people as a whole are pushing to the forefront of the public consciousness, especially at a time when they're, being dominated by right-wing legislation that is creating a permission structure to basically write out trans people from existence. And I find it ridiculous to hyper focus on this, even if it is to disparage it, right? Even if it is something that is truly objectionable behavior, let's say, right? I just don't think it's necessary to talk about it at all. And I don't like that there are people who engage in this endeavor without tackling the reasons as to why we're having this conversation to begin with. Okay? As far as this conversation goes, like a great example of this is like trans people in sports. The only reason why we have this conversation is not because of the ethics of it all, or honesty or fairness in sports, or any of those reasons. The real reason why we're having this conversation is because it is a way to create a permission structure to write out trans people. And it starts with that, but the overarching goals are always to stop trans people from existing, okay? No more HRT, not like the kind that we all like, not the kind that cis people use, like, balding pills like the ones that I use, which is still HRT, or TRT like Joe Rogan or RFK Jr. uses. Not that kind. We like that kind. We like that kind of, expressions of gender. We like those initiatives. Okay? We just don't like it when trans people are using it. We don't like it, and we need to stop it, and we need to put an end to it. That's the ultimate goal here. No gender affirming care for trans people, right? So I see no reason to spend a good amount of time with people talking to people that don't even give a shit about, high school athletics. They just don't care. They don't care about women's sports at all. They routinely shit on women's sports, and they're simply using this as a way to find an argument that is that seemingly is more reasonable. Okay. Then there's the people who maybe in good faith try to tackle the problem and offer reasonable critiques to the problem itself and say, hey, you know what? Like, trans people are not exactly dominating in the field of sports. And I myself have engaged in this conversation every now and then with respect to like examples of very prominent, very famous athletes that have used hormone therapy and have become legends in their own right, overcoming great adversity, such as Lionel Messi, for example. And the reason why we don't make a big deal about that is because Lionel Messi is a cis man. And at the end of the day, though, most of these people that fucking come at it, most of these people that like talk about this problem or claim that there's a massive problem to begin with, are doing it because they've been duped by others who are transphobic. And this creates a fantastic permission structure to shit on trans people. That's it.
Danger of immigrants. That's not to say that crime hasn't happened in this location. There are countless areas in the United States where crime happens, including apartment buildings. And some of those crimes involve gangs.
I understand, but it's complex as someone that doesn't watch you that often to actually know what your stance on transgender women and women's sports from an outside perspective, since you don't answer it clearly. No, I have. I have answered it time and time again. I don't give a shit. I don't care. I don't care at all. And I don't have any issue with trans women participating in athletic competition all the way up to fucking professional sports with cis women. As long as there is like a level of regulation where someone isn't just like saying I'm a trans woman now without actually undergoing any sort of HRT whatsoever to simply go and compete against cis women, I have no issue with it. And for the record, that example that I just said, that counter narrative, even that in and of itself is not a real one. It's so not a real one that the only time when people fucking actually come out with this is actually Republican charlatans themselves that are like, we couldn't find a single fucking person that actually wanted to portray themselves as a woman to specifically dominate, female sports. So we became that example. Right wingers do this all the fucking time. They do it all the time. It's so weird. Yeah. Here's the greatest example of this. The Daily Wire show, Lady Ballers, wasn't supposed to be a work of fiction. It originally was supposed to be a documentary tracking the process of a cisgender man that, you know, lied and cynically tried to become a, you know, try to claim that they were female now so that they could fucking participate in female athletics. They couldn't find an example of that in the real world, and they couldn't even recreate it in the real world themselves, so they decided to make a work of fiction instead. That's how it works, okay?
Damn, this guy's good.